10. After the war. 1. Arjun's chariot. The Pandavas returned to their camps. It was the rule that they should enter the camp of the enemies. They proceeded towards the camp of Duryodhana. They entered, blowing their conchs. The Panchajanya and the great Devadatta were blown lustily. Krishn did not want their enthusiasm to be damped by the scene at Samantapanchaka. He was the most cheerful among all of them. As soon as they arrived at the camp, Krishn asked them all to stand still. He told Arjun, "Arjun, take up your Gandhi and your quivers. Get down from the chariot." Krishn was still sitting in the chariot. Arjun did as he was bid. After he had got down, Krishn abandoned the reins and the whip and descended from the golden chariot fretted with gems. The moment Krishn got down, the great Hanuman who was on the banner suddenly sprang into the skies and disappeared from their sight. It was amazing. They all turned their eyes on Arjun's chariot. Even as they were all looking, the chariot began to burn like a pile of wood, and in a matter of a few moments it was just a heap of ashes. The white horses of Arjun were all burnt up. The chariot of Arjun, the sight of which would strike terror into the hearts of the Kauravas, was now a heap of ashes. Arjun turned his tear-filled eyes to Krishn and said, "My lord, what is this I see? My chariot, my golden chariot which was given to me by Agni when he burnt the Kandav forest, my chariot which was driven by you all these days, this my chariot is burnt up under my eyes and for no reason at all. I do not understand. Please tell me why this happened." Krishn's face was stern. He said, "Arjun, its purpose has been served. It is not necessary any more. This chariot has taken all the many astras of Drona and Radhaya. It has withstood the Brahmastra sent by those two men, and the astras of Ashvathama. It should have been burnt up long ago. But I was sitting on it and so it was not burnt. I have abandoned it now after you have achieved what you set out to achieve. So it is burnt. I have allowed it to become reduced to ashes. Everything in this world is created for a purpose. The moment the purpose is served, it is not needed any more." The sternness left the face of Krishn. He was smiling once again. Again Krishn said, "Arjun, it is even so with men. Each man is set on this strange eventful journey called life. He has been sent into this world with a purpose. Once that purpose is served, the earth has no more need of him. It is the case with all of us, even me. I have created myself on this earth for a purpose. It is not yet over. Something still remains. The moment it is finished, I will die too, and so will you and your dear brothers. But that is not to be in the near future. Come, do not grieve. Let us set about our next task." Krishn congratulated Yudhishthir in formal terms and embraced him. Krishn said, "Yudhishthir, it is customary for the winners to sleep outside the enemy camp on the night of their victory. You must observe it. You must all sleep away from your camp." "So be it," said Yudhishthir. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Krishn, the war is ended, and by your grace we have won the world. But I am afraid. Gandhari, the mother of Duryodhana, is possessed of great powers. She has been God-fearing and righteous. She is now suffering the sorrow of a mother who has lost her children. Hearing that her Duryodhana has been killed by unfair means, she may curse us. I want you to go and pacify her. We will follow later on." Krishn smiled and said, "You are right. The curse of Gandhari must not be spent on you. There are others to receive it. I will go at once." When Duryodhana fell with his thighs broken, Sanjay went back to the city. With his eyes raining tears, with his frame trembling with anguish, with his two arms raised aloft in mourning, Sanjay entered the palace of the king Dhritarashtra. He said, "O my king! O my lord! We have lost everything. Time and fate have robbed us of all that we had." The old king was there with Gandhari and the wives of his sons. Vidur was there and so many others. Sanjay composed himself and said, "My lord, I am Sanjay. The war is ended. Salya is gone. Shakuni is gone. His son Uluk is dead. Duryodhan has been killed by Bheem. Dhritarashtra fell down in a dead faint. Vidur was overcome by faintness too. The king would regain consciousness and lose it again." It was pitiable to see the condition of the king. The women attendants tried to revive Gandhari. They could not. She was in a dead swoon. After a while, they composed themselves, and Vidur tried to console the weeping parents of Duryodhan. It was then that Krishn arrived in Hastinapur. He entered the palace and was taken to the hall where Dhritarashtra was seated. Tears came to his eyes when he saw the condition of the king, and his heart was torn when he saw that grand Lady Gandhari sunk in woe. He wept at the sight of these two old parents who were grieving for their dead sons. He spoke to them for a long time. He spoke to them gentle, loving words. He was full of compassion and he spoke to them with his heart full of love and sympathy. He convinced them that the death of all the great heroes was because of Duryodhan. Finally he spoke to Gandhari, "Mother, on the day I came to Hastinapur on a mission of peace, Duryodhan tried to capture me. You stopped him, or rather, you tried to stop him with the words, 'Where there is righteousness, there is victory.' Mother, it is even so. You must not blame the Pandavas for this calamity. Yudhishthir is grieved because he has caused you so much unhappiness. You know how much he tried to avoid the war. Please be kind to the children of Pandu. They have suffered so much in life. They have never had a father. You must be affectionate towards them. You must not turn your angry eyes on the sons of Pandu." Dhritarashtra and Gandhari were consoled by the sweet and gentle words of Krishn. Gandhari said, "What you say is true, Krishn. As soon as I heard that my child, my Duryodhan, was killed, my heart was shaken by emotion, and my reason threatened to give way. But now, after hearing your words, I feel better. I will behave with fairness towards the sons of Kunti. With my children dead, I have no one to comfort me, except you." She cried again and Krishn pacified her with kind words. He took leave of them and went back to the Pandavas. The night was spent by them outside the camp of Duryodhan. The Pandavas had just Krishn and Satyaki with them. The rest were in the Pandav camp. 2. Aswatthama's grief. Sanjay went back to the presence of the king. He saw Duryodhan writhing in agony. His body was covered with dust and his eyes were weeping futile tears. Looking at the monarch alone, in pain, Sanjay's heart was ready to break. This was the king who had the entire world at his feet. There was no one to equal him in his glory and in wealth. He had never known what it was to walk even in the streets. His palace was like a temple. Sanjay thought of the procession of the royal household when the king would go seated on his elephant looking like the lord of the heavens on his Airavat. This king was today lying on the ground, his thighs broken, with no one by his side to speak comforting words. He was alone. Sanjay thought fate was a terrible thing. It was the great leveler. It knew no difference between king and soldier. Duryodhan's hands were pressed hard on the ground, and he was trying his best to bear the pain in his body. His head was shaking weakly, and he was trying to control himself. Sanjay came near him and sat by his side. His frame was racked by sobs. Duryodhan looked at him. He said, "What a gentle soul you are, Sanjay. You have come to me to keep company. This life refuses to leave this mangled body. I am passing through hell. I am reaching the heavens. Fate wants me to taste hell first, for all my sins, perhaps. This pain is unbearable. Look at me. I had Bheeshm, Drona, Kripa, Ashvathama, Radhaya, Salya, Kritvarma, Dasashan and 1,000 others with me, and I was sure of winning the war. I am now here on the ground, defeated in a duel by unfair means, and I cannot even die. I was the lord of 11 Akshohinis. Look at my condition now. I want you to do something for me. You must find out where the 3 survivors are. Tell them that their king has been defeated in an unfair fight by Bheeshm. Tell them that the king is still alive and would like to see them before he dies. Tell my parents about my condition. Tell my mother that her son did not run away from the battlefield. Tell her that I died bravely. Tell her that I have no regrets. Go now and send Ashvathama, Kritvarma, and Kripa to me. He collapsed on the ground. The effort of talking was too much for him. Several of the citizens of Hastinapur came to pay him their last respects. But he had become immune to it all. He had fainted away. The 3 remaining friends of Duryodhan hurried to his side when they heard about him from Sanjay. They saw him there on the ground, with his thighs broken, sighing like a broken serpent. They rushed to him. Ashvathama, recovering from the faint which had come over him, took the hands of the king in his and said, "My lord, my king, I am grieved to see you like this." Duryodhan spoke with great effort. He said, "Evidently it is written in the book of fate that this should be the end. I am not sorry, my friends. I have every assurance that I will reach the heavens to join all those who have gone there ahead of me. Fate is too powerful. It is no use blaming it on others." He lay down, wiping his tears with his hands and pushing away his matted hair from his forehead. Ashvathama glowed like fire with anger. He said, "These Pandavas have been hiding behind the cloak of Dharm, and they are more unrighteous than confirmed sinners. They killed my father by the meanest lie imaginable. They have now killed you in such a cruel manner. Listen to my words, my friend. I will today destroy all the Panchals under the very eyes of Krishn. I will kill the Pandavas tonight. Grant me permission, my king. I will not rest till they are all killed." Duryodhan was touched by the affection Ashvathama bore him. There was a time when he thought that Ashvathama was more fond of the Pandavas. Duryodhan said, "Acharya, please bring water in a vessel." It was brought. The king said, "We will officially make you the commander of our army. I wish Ashvathama to be given the coronation bath." The coronation was over. The king was happy to have someone to avenge the cruel death of all the heroes in the Kaurav army. He thanked the great Ashvathama for his love and sent them away. He was very happy and very unhappy too. The 3 men left the king on the ground and went towards the south. Their minds were busy with thoughts about the task ahead of them. They were tired out and hurt by the many arrows that had been shot at them all through the day. They reached a spot very near the camp of the Pandavas. They were now in a small forest which hugged the battlefield. They found some water. After their thirst was quenched, they rested under the trees. Kripa was very tired and so was Kritvarma. The moment they placed their heads on the ground they were fast asleep. They were so exhausted with the day's fight, and with the mental anguish. Ashvathama was awake. He could not sleep. He sat there looking at everything and at nothing in particular. His mind was busy thinking out a plan to avenge the death of his father, and more than that, the killing of Duryodhan by Bheeshm. He was looking around. He saw that the tree was full of nests built by crows. The crows were all sleeping peacefully. Suddenly an owl came. It was a terrible-looking bird. It came quietly to the tree. Its coming was noiseless. It set about the task of destroying the sleeping crows. There was a great massacre of all the crows. After destroying them, the owl looked happy. It went back to where it came from. The owl gave an idea to Ashvathama. He thought that it was the best thing to do. He would go to the Pandav camp and kill all of them. They would be fast asleep. Tonight was the first night of peaceful sleep for all of them. He could wreak his vengeance on all of them. Ashvathama was so excited that he could not sit still. He woke up the others from sleep. They wanted to know what the matter was. Ashvathama told them about the owl and how he got the idea from it. They were horrified at the suggestion. Kripa said, Ashvathama, your idea of punishing the Pandavas is not right. After all, our king was not an ideal king. He was a cruel man. He was not righteous. He had treated them so badly all these years. They had to kill him. The breaking of the thighs of our Duryodhan was the oath of Bheem, which was taken in the presence of all of us. It was an unfair fight, I admit. But we cannot stand in judgment on the workings of Nemesis. You have sworn to avenge the death of the king, and that of your father. It is commendable. But we will do it openly. We will, the three of us, challenge them and fight till we die. But this plan of yours is dastardly. It is evil. If you carry it out, you will incur infamy and the censure of all right-minded people. I am not for this. Please, Ashvathama, desist from this sin. Your name has been untainted so far. Do not soil the purity of your reputation by this sin. Ashvathama was adamant. He refused to be convinced. He was set on this. He felt that the river of Dharm had broken its banks, and it was the Pandavas who had begun the unfair fighting. The death of his father at the hands of Drishtadhum was still a raw wound in his mind. On top of that came the killing of Duryodhan, his dear friend. He was mad. He said, I am definite about what I am going to do. If you do not want to support me, I do not care. I will go alone and do the needful. Ashvathama got into his chariot. He had with him a sword which Lord Shankar had given him. He took it in his hand and set out towards the Pandav camp. Kritvarma and Kripa shouted to him that they would also go with him. Happiness or sorrow, good or bad, had to be shared by them from then on. They had made an unspoken pact. They were the only three left out of the army of the great Duryodhan. They had to avenge the killing of Duryodhan, their master. 3. The Midnight Massacre. The chariot of Ashvathama reached the camp. Kripa and Kritvarma were with him. But when he entered the tents, they were outside. They promised to him that they would not let anyone escape. They were stationed at the entrance to the camp. Ashvathama went in the dark towards the tent of Drishtadhum. He entered it. He saw the great Drishtadhum sleeping peacefully on a snow-white bed. Ashvathama approached him with noiseless steps. He kicked him violently. Drishtadhum woke up from his sleep. But he was not able to defend himself. Ashvathama had caught hold of his hair and was raining kicks on him. He began to press him down on his bed. Ashvathama took up the string of the bow and tied it round the neck of the unfortunate Drishtadhum and tried to strangle him. Indistinctly Drishtadhum murmured, "Kill me with an arrow. Fight with me and send me to heaven. This is not a good death for a Kshatriya." Ashvathama laughed like one possessed. He said, "You are a man who killed his guru. I will not let you reach heaven. You will go to hell. That is what you deserve. You will be damned forever." Ashvathama strangled the life out of Drishtadhum. He kicked him all over the body till he was dead. Hearing the noise of the struggle, people who were around got up from their sleep. They thought that some Rakshas had entered the camp. The Panchals got up and tried to fight with him. But Ashvathama killed all of them. Everyone was slaughtered. The sons of Draupadi tried their best to resist him. But it was easy for Ashvathama to kill all the people in the camp. Uttamauja, Yudhishthir, the heroes who had come out of the war unscathed, were now slaughtered in their sleep. Shikhandi was dead. Everyone was killed. People were trying to escape. But Kripa and Kritvarma, who were stationed at the gate, prevented this. Kripa set fire to the camp. It made it easier for the son of Drona to continue his work of destruction. The camp had been made to burn up in 3 different places, and the great Acharya Kripa was responsible for this good deed. These men had become beasts, no, worse than beasts. Beasts never kill their own kind. They kill if they need food and they kill if they are in danger. But this inhuman deed, this midnight massacre of sleeping men, was the work of men who did not deserve to be called men. The three men, drunk with the joy of having achieved this feat, hurried to the spot where Duryodhan was dying. Life had not left his mangled body. He lifted his head up at the noise they made by their approach. The wild animals had already begun to come near Duryodhan. He was trying hard to keep them from coming too near. He was defenseless against this dreadful brood of wild animals. The three men came near him and sat down. They saw the mace of the king lying by his side, the mace which was his only friend. Kripa said, "Evidently, my lord, your Gada is to be your companion to heaven. You will not abandon your best friend." Ashvatthama said, "Duryodhan, I want you to listen to me carefully. I am happy to tell you that I have destroyed the entire Pandav army. The 5 Pandavas with Krishn and Satyaki are alive on their side, and on ours we 3 are alive." He told the king how he had managed to massacre the entire army. Duryodhan was pleased. He said, "Ashvatthama, you have today achieved what Bheeshm, Drona, or Radhaya could not do. I am proud of you. May God bless you. I am now ready to die. We will all meet in heaven. I take leave of you and this dear earth." The king was silent. The great Duryodhan, the Kaurav monarch, was dead. It is said that, the moment Duryodhan died, Sanjay lost the power of seeing all that happened to everyone. The power was withdrawn from him. The sun ushered in the most terrible of all days. The charioteer of Drishtadhum was the sole survivor in the massacre in the camp. He hurried to the presence of Yudhishthir and told him about the tragic events of the night. Yudhishthir fainted with the shock. It was Satyaki who supported his limp form. All the Pandav brothers were without their senses. Yudhishthir was revived, and the others. Yudhishthir spoke to Nakul, asking him to bring Draupadi. Nakul hurried to the quarters of the queen. The king went to the camp accompanied by his brothers and saw the awful scene. He could not bear to see them all dead. The sight of the brave Drishtadhum was too much for him. This man, this fire-born Drishtadhum, had steered them through the great war, and he was now dead, killed in the most ruthless manner imaginable. The 5 sons of Draupadi were there, their bodies cut up by the sword of Ashvatthama. Arjun saw Yudhamenyu and Uddamauja, and his heart broke with the shock of it. Bheem and Satyaki sat by the dead form of their dear friend Drishtadhum. Neither could comfort the other. Nakula's chariot was heard to approach. They all saw Draupadi. She was helped out of the chariot. She took 2 steps towards her dead sons and collapsed on the ground. Her grief could not be assuaged by words. Draupadi lamented her fate. It was a terrible thing to see Draupadi with the dead forms of her sons, her brothers, all around her. She had lost all that was hers in a single night. It was something the like of which had never happened to anyone before. Suddenly she stood up. She dried her tears. There was now fire leaping out of her eyes. She said, "Unless and until that Ashvatthama is killed, I will not eat. I will die on this spot." They told her that Ashvatthama could not be killed since he had been granted eternal life. Draupadi said, "The death of my sons and my brothers must be avenged. I know that Ashvatthama has a jewel on his head. Bring that to me. Make him lose it. The loss of that jewel will be worse than death for him. Bheem, you are the one man who will do it for me. You must please me." "So be it," said Bheem. He set out in search of Ashvatthama. Nakul was his charioteer. Yudhishthir was trying in vain to pacify the unfortunate Draupadi with gentle words. He was himself so unhappy. It was a terrible sight to see her form racked by sobs, and with her mind almost unhinged at the sight of her sons, her 5 sons, dead, every one of them. Krishn was concerned about Bheem. He had gone alone. Krishn went to Yudhishthir and said, "Bheem is already upset by the death of the children and his friend. He is going in search of Ashvatthama, the most ruthless killer. Ashvatthama will stop at nothing. He may hurt Bheem. He has with him the powerful astra called Brahmasirsha. If he sends it against Bheem, our Bheem will be destroyed. Drona gave this astra to Arjun. So his son wanted to learn it too. Drona did not want to teach it to him, as he did not trust him with it. But by persistent nagging, Ashvatthama managed to learn it. No one knows that Ashvatthama has that astra with him. But I know. I will go in pursuit of Bheem. I will take Arjun with me. My chariot is ready. Krishn and Arjun set out in haste to catch up with Bheem. They went far away from the neighborhood of Kurukshetra. Finally they found Ashvatthama hiding behind Vyas on the banks of the river Ganga. Bheem had already found him. He had his bow ready and he was challenging Ashvatthama to fight with him. Arjun and Krishn went with the speed of wind to the place where Bheem was stationed. 4. Krishn's curse. Ashvatthama smiled at Bheem. His face had lost all the luster it used to have. He now looked like a nishad who kills animals and sells them. His face was ghastly. The great glow on the face of the son of Drona was gone. He looked so cruel and so hard. He smiled a sinister smile, and taking up a blade of grass in his hand, he invoked the great astra by name Brahmasirsha, and sent it towards Bheem and Arjun and said, "May the world be Pandavless." From that blade of grass dense fumes were issuing forth. It began to throw out terrible flames, and they were coming towards Bheem and Arjun with fury and speed. Krishn's guess was right. Even as he was invoking the astra, Krishn said, "Arjun, Arjun, you can see what he is doing. He is invoking the Brahmasirsha. You know it too. Your guru taught you the incantations for that in a moment of extreme pleasure. It was after he was released from the crocodile by you. You have to send the astra to counteract this, if your brothers and you are to be saved. Be quick. The astra is on its way." Arjun was quicker than thought. The same astra was sent by him too. The two flames coursed along the sky, bent on destruction. The world was shaken by the power of the astras. Oceans began to dry up and the mountains were found to shake and tremble, as though they were wisps of cotton caught in a gale. The two rishis Vyas and Narad came between the astras to prevent their colliding. If they had collided, the world would have come to an end. They stopped the two astras in the air with their hands, so great was the power of their penance. They said, "This is the one astra which should not be used on the earth. This has to be recalled immediately." Arjun said, "I sent it to counteract that of that man Ashvatthama. I had no intention of doing the world any harm. I will certainly obey your honored selves." He recalled it. It was not an easy astra to withdraw. It needed a man who was given to severe austerities. Arjun was able to recall it. But Ashvatthama could not recall it. He was not pure. He was a murderer in cold blood. The astra would not obey him. It would not be recalled. He was terrified by the magnitude of his sins. He fell at the feet of the two rishis and said, "I am a great sinner. This astra is angry with me. It will not be withdrawn. I do not know what I am to do. I was mad with anger against the Pandavas, and so I invoked the astra, and I have said, 'May there be no more Pandavas on the earth.' I am helpless. I do not know what is to happen to the world. Please protect me. Please save me from the wrath of the astra." The rishis said, "You have done a wicked thing. If this astra is baffled by a more powerful astra like the Brahmastra, then the land where this takes place will not have rain for 12 years. That is the reason why Arjun did not use any other weapon now. You hate such a righteous person and think of destroying the sons of Pandu. Think kindly of them and withdraw the astra. As a recompense, remove the jewel from your head and give it to the Pandavas." Ashvatthama did not like it. He said, "This jewel is a very precious gem. It will guard the wearer against all weapons, diseases and hunger. I cannot part with it. As for this astra, I am not able to withdraw it. I have aimed it at the Pandavas. If they are to live, then I will direct it against the wombs of all the women in their family. The astra will make the world Pandav-less that way. The astra was made to kill all the unborn children of the Pandavas. It was made to enter the womb of Uthara, who was bearing the child of Abhimanyu. Krishn was very angry with Ashvathama. He had never before been so angry. He said, Ashvathama, you are the most contemptible of all the creatures that have been born. You say that you have killed the son of Abhimanyu. I will give life to that child, and you will see it. You are doomed to live forever. You will wander this earth alone, without a single companion, without a loving word from anyone. You will see this child rule the world after he is installed on the throne of the Pauravas. He will rule the world for 60 years. You will see it. Ashvathama was made to part with the gem. He left the place and went away, alone, into the wide, wide world, to live forever. Dhritarashtra was literally sunk in woe. It was not possible for him to bear the immense pain caused by the death of all his sons. Sanjay and Vidur tried their best to tell him about the necessity for courage. They tried their best to make him realize that this end had been predicted long ago. Sanjay, always outspoken, said that the king had himself to blame for the dire calamity. The king was not offended by his words. He was humble. He admitted that it was all his fault. Vidur was very sorry for his foolish and inefficient brother. He tried to explain to him the secrets of birth and death, and the fact that the soul is indestructible. Vyas came and he finally coaxed the king to compose himself and go to the field of battle. Now that the war was over, the dead men had to be brought away from the field and cremated. The final funeral rites had to be performed. The gruesome visit to the battle field was necessary. All the women of the palace and all the women of the city walked with the blind king to see their dear ones on the field. Women whom even the sun had not seen, walked now in the streets of the city with their faces wet with tears, with their hair all unbound. Vidur remembered the day when the Pandavas left Hastinapur. He remembered the way in which Draupadi prophesied this when she walked out of the city, even like these women, 14 years back. The Brahmins were preceding the king reciting the holy Rudra hymns, even as Tamya had done on that memorable day 14 years ago. It had all come true. Nemesis had overtaken the king and his sinful court. Vidur spoke not a word. He walked along with them silently. On the way they were met by Kripa, Kritvarma and Ashvathama, the sole survivors of the Kaurav army. They came to the king and queen and spoke words of comfort. They told them too about the massacre in the Pandav camp. Kripa said, "We are afraid of the Pandavas. They will be looking for us. We dare not stay any longer. We will take leave of you." They went away. Some distance from there they parted ways. They embraced each other and bade farewell. Kripa went to Hastinapur. Kritvarma went back to Dwahrika. Ashvathama went to the banks of the Ganga, to the hermitage of Vyas. It was there that Bheem found him later. After this dismissal of Ashvathama, Bheem hurried to Draupadi with the gem in his hand. He gave it to her. Krishn told them all that had happened. Draupadi was pacified, and her grief abated slightly since the killer had been punished. She gave the gem to Yudhishthir and said that it was fit for the king, and for no one else. Yudhishthir took it to please Draupadi. 5. The embrace of death. The Pandavas set out for Hastinapur. They had not seen the city since 14 years ago. They were now going back to the city as rulers of the kingdom. Yudhishthir was the king. But their happiness was all destroyed because of Ashvathama. He had avenged the killing of Duryodhana. They were all sunk in woe. This mournful procession set out towards the city. Satyaki and Krishn were the two people who took good care of them. They heard that Dhritarashtra with the women of the palace and the women of the city had proceeded towards the battlefield, and they went there to meet them. The Pandavas saw the women on the field. Their lamentations greeted them. Yudhishthir went straight to Dhritarashtra and fell at his feet. He announced himself and his brothers. Dhritarashtra embraced him without affection. He thought of the Pandavas as the causes of the deaths of his sons. He could not welcome them with affection. But he knew how to behave himself in front of others. He spoke gentle words to Yudhishthir. His heart was full of hatred for Bheeshm. If he had been able to, he would have burnt him with his looks. Dhritarashtra held out his arms to embrace Bheeshm. Bheeshm was proceeding towards him. Krishn stopped him with signs. Krishn hurried to the gymnasium and quickly brought the iron image of Bheeshm which Duryodhana had been using for his daily practice. Krishn placed it in front of Dhritarashtra. The old king embraced it. The moment he embraced it, Dhritarashtra remembered that he had the killer of his sons in his arms. His arms now tightened about the iron figure. It went on getting tighter and tighter, and the iron image was crushed to powder because of the powerful arms of the king. Bheeshm was looking on with horrified eyes. The king's body was wet with his own blood, and his chest was full of blood too. The effort had made him faint. The king fell on the ground in a dead faint. Sanjay revived him. The king realized the gravity of the crime he had committed. He was sorry. He began to wail, "In my anger I have killed Bheeshm. I have killed Bheeshm, the son of my own brother. I have killed that child." Krishn realized that all his anger and fury had abated. He came up to the king and said, "I knew how angry you were with Bheeshm. But my lord, this is not Bheeshm you have crushed to powder. Bheeshm is safe. I knew your anger and your strength too. So I placed this image in front of you. It is an image of Bheeshm, made of iron. Duryodhana had it made. I placed it in front of you. Now that your hatred is all spent on this image, it is but right that you should show your affection to the sons of your own brother. Please set your mind on righteousness and do the right thing by them. They are also unhappy about the war. Please comfort them and be a father to them at least now." Dhritarashtra was cleansed of his evil thoughts. He wanted to be good to the sons of Pandu. He said, "I am now rid of all anger against the Pandavas. Please let me embrace them with real affection now." Bheeshm approached him. The king embraced him warmly, and then Arjun, and then Nakul, and lastly Sahdev. They all sighed a sigh of relief. But the worst was not over yet. They had to meet Gandhari. She had been very angry with them. She had decided to curse them. Knowing her thoughts, Vyas hurried to her side. He said, "Gandhari, my daughter, I know what is in your mind. It is not right. In your affection for your son, you are thinking sinful thoughts. Try to be forgiving." When your Duryodhana left for the battlefield, he came to take leave of you. He said, "Mother, say that I will be successful. If you say it, I will certainly win the war. Say it, mother." But you said, "Where there is dharma, there will victory be." Gandhari, you knew that he would not win. You knew that his cause was not righteous. Now, it is wrong to undo all the good you have done so far. You have been the most patient of all women. This anger of yours has to be abandoned. The Pandavas do not deserve it. Gandhari listened in silence. She said, "Father, I am not angry. My mind was unhinged for a while by the death of my sons. But I am not angry with the Pandavas for fighting this war, and they did but do the right thing. It was my son who wanted war, and they had to fight. I know that. What makes me angry is not that. It is something more personal. What makes me angry is the fact that Bheeshm drank the blood of his own brother. He has killed my Duryodhana in an unfair fight. These things have made me angry. In his love for the kingdom, Bheeshm has done these things to my sons. That is burning me." Hearing her words, Bheeshm came up to her. He was very soft and gentle in his speech, much to the amusement of Krishn. He said, Mother, I did perform an unjust act during my fight with Duryodhan. I admit it. It was not possible to kill him. To protect myself from him, I had to do it. You must forgive me for this fault of mine. There was no fighter like your son in all the 3 worlds. I could never have killed him in a fair fight. Not even Indra. But Duryodhan was sinful. He harassed us for years. Much against his wish, Yudhishthir was made to fight this war. As for my breaking his thigh, I had a reason for it. I had taken an oath long ago that I would do it. Mother, if I had Dean at the moment he insulted Draupadi, you would not have been angry with me. You would even have said that what I did was right. But I was stopped by my brother. I had to wait all these years to fulfill my oath. Gandhari said, Bheem, you have praised my Duryodhan as the best fighter in all the 3 worlds. I will forgive you. But what about the drinking of the blood of my son Dussashan? The blood of your brother. That was a cruel thing to do. How will you explain that? Bheem said, Mother, of course it was a cruel act. I had sworn to do it in a moment of passion. I am sorely tried because of my quick temper. You must forgive this. Since I had sworn to do it, I did it. I did not swallow a single drop of my brother's blood. It did not pass beyond my lips and teeth. Radhaya knew it. I had to do it because of my oath. It is an inhuman act. I know it. I ask you most humbly to forgive me these things, Mother. Gandhari was pacified by the sweet and penitent words of Bheem. Krishn was trying not to smile at this new Bheem who was all apologies. Gandhari turned her angry face on Yudhishthir now. She said, Where is that king? Hearing that voice, Yudhishthir knew how angry she was with him. He came up to her with folded palms. He announced himself, Here I am, Mother, the killer of your sons. I deserve your curses since I am the cause of the destruction of the entire world. I am waiting for your curse. I deserve it. With very great effort, Gandhari reminded herself of the words of Vyas. She had tied her eyes with a silken scarf. She turned her face away in trying to control her mounting anger. She sighed like a serpent. In the end she succeeded in conquering herself. Righteousness won in the conflict between the love for her son and Dharm. The great Gandhari controlled herself and forgave them. When she was turning her face away, her eyes, though hidden by the scarf, happened to see the nails on the hands of Yudhishthir who was prostrate at her feet. Her angry glance fell on the nails, and it is said that they at once assumed a blue hue and lost their glow. Such was the power of Gandhari. Seeing this, Arjun fled from her and hid behind Krishn. Krishn laughed silently at the terror which this one woman could inspire in the heart of Arjun, known all the world over by the name Jishnu. Krishn whispered the name into his ears, and was amused to see the blush spreading over his face. 6. The Curse of Gandhari. Gandhari's anger had passed over their heads, even as the great Narayanastra had. She had been pacified too by their humility. She showed genuine affection and welcomed them to her arms. The Pandavas met their mother Kunti. 14 years had passed since they parted in sorrow. Kunti embraced all of them. She touched them again and again. She ran loving fingers over the scars and wounds which they had sustained during the war. She shed tears of joy at the thought that they were alive after the great war. She took the unfortunate Draupadi in her arms and tried to pacify her. Draupadi cried out, "Mother, all your grandsons are dead. Abhimanyu is dead and all my sons are gone. It is so long since you saw them last, and you will never see them again. What is the use of this victory and this kingdom? I have no children." She sobbed into the breast of Kunti, and Kunti tried to speak words of comfort to the poor woman. They all followed the king and Gandhari to the battlefield. Gandhari spoke to Draupadi, "Look at me, my daughter, and comfort yourself. This is all the result of the workings of fate. It is the end of the world. Vidur prophesied this long ago, and Krishn gave due warning when he came to Hastinapur. When a man is spurred by fate, he becomes deaf and blind. This had to happen, and there is no use in grieving for the past. My dear child, do not grieve for your sons. They have reached the heavens. I am also like you. I have lost all my sons. Who is to comfort whom? The destruction of the entire race is because of me. They walked towards the battlefield. Gandhari could see it all with her mind's eye. She had been granted that boon because of her severe penance. Even from a distance she could see the gruesome scene. She saw the wives of the warriors or their mothers falling on the dead forms of their dear ones and weeping bitter tears. Dhritarashtra was proceeding further. Gandhari spoke to Krishn. She showed him the dead forms of her sons, and she showed the women, who were her daughters-in-law, lamenting the deaths of their lords. The scenes were heart-rending. Gandhari went to the spot where Duryodhan was lying. She fell down in a dead faint. It was terrible to behold her grief. She regained her consciousness and wept bitter tears over the form of her dead son. She smoothed his brow and tried to untangle his locks, which were matted with blood. Krishn stood by and spoke nothing. He heard her lamentations and those of the wife of Duryodhan. Duryodhan's wife was torn between the bodies of her lord and her son. Gandhari showed him all the many scenes. He was made to see Uttara, the wife of Abhimanyu, weeping over the form of her beloved lord. They had been married but 6 months, and he was dead. Radhaya was being mourned by his wife. Salya's wives were all there. It was altogether the most horrible scene that was ever enacted. Gandhari saw all this. Suddenly Gandhari's anger flared up. She turned on Krishn. She said, "Krishn, all this is the result of your indifference. I am sure you could have averted this if you had wanted to. The anger between the Kauravas and the Pandavas could have been prevented by you. If you had been impartial to both the parties, if you had tried to, you could have prevented this annihilation. If it is true that I have performed penances, if I have any power, I will use all that to curse you for the ruin you have wrought on the house of the Kurus. I am cursing you. Because of your indifference, the Kauravas and the Pandavas were bent on destroying each other. The world was destroyed because of you. The enmity between cousins caused the destruction of the family. Even so, 36 years from today, your family, the entire family of the Vrishnis, will be destroyed by itself. The cousins will all fight and kill each other. The women of your house will weep even as these women are weeping now. This is the curse of Gandhari." Krishn smiled his sweetest smile and said, "Mother, I know that I am the only person who is capable of destroying the entire house of the Vrishnis. They are indestructible. They can be destroyed only by themselves. Only a Vrishni can kill a Vrishni. No one else is capable of killing them. No god can hurt them. They have got to die at the hands of each other. I am glad your curse has solved the problem for me. I would have had to kill them if you had not cursed me. Mother, I am indeed fortunate to have had your cooperation in the extinction of the house of the Vrishnis. You have really blessed us. There is also this to be said. Your anger has now found an outlet. You can never more be angry with Yudhishthir. I am prepared to do anything for the Pandavas. If my house has to die so that they may live, I am only too happy to oblige. I am telling you again, Mother, the Pandavas mean my very life to me." The Pandavas had been listening to the curse of Gandhari. They had just passed through the dreadful experience of killing their cousins, and they were horrified to hear that the same fate was threatening the house of the Vrishnis. But Krishn was taking it all with a smile. He was doing it so that they could live. The Pandavas felt humble in the presence of so much love. Krishn spoke his mind to Gandhari. He said, "Rouse up your spirit of dharma, mother. This sorrow is not good for you. This is because of you and not because of me. You were too fond of your son Duryodhan. His pride should have been curbed even at the outset. You knew your brother Shakuni. You should not have allowed him into your house. You were indifferent and not I. Duryodhan was encouraged to wallow in sin. All the elders in the court, and you, looked askance when he began to harass the Pandavas. You are responsible for all this, and your indifference is now being pushed onto my shoulders. You were there when I came to Hastinapur. You know how much I tried to coax Duryodhan to give up his hatred of the Pandavas. Yet you impute the sin of indifference to me. You have no right to do it. You knew about the house of lack. You could have taken some trouble and stopped your son from that sin. Your husband and you ruined that Duryodhan, and now, when the world is destroyed because of him, you are trying to blame it on me. You are fond of your son. That is clouding your vision. Dhritarashtra is to blame for this. And you, such a good and righteous woman, allowed this injustice to flourish under your eaves. It is not right that you should blame it on me. I am not sorry for the death of the Kauravas. They have got more than they deserved. Your son deserved the worst hell for his sinful actions, and he has managed to reach heaven. He has cheated the Pandavas even when he died. But I am glad about it in a way, since it will comfort you. They have gone to heaven because of your goodness and your penance. You must not mourn the death of your sons who are with the gods now. Throw away this grief, mother. I ask you most humbly, throw it away. Just now, when you saw the form of your son, you said, Duryodhan came to me just when he set out for the battle. He stood with folded palms before me and said, in this battle between cousins, you must wish me success. If you say it, I am sure to win. I knew that he had launched an unnatural war. I told him, my child, where there is, their victory is. You are fighting an unjust war. You cannot win. But I bless you. I say that you will fight gloriously and reach the heavens. You cannot win, my son. But you will have a glorious death. You told me all this just now. You were not sorry when you said that to your child because you are such a righteous woman. And now, because of this sorrow, you are forgetting them and trying to blame it on me. I would not have been surprised if your husband had said it. But you, mother, you are different. You can face truth. Come, shake off this sorrow. Gandhari was speechless after this tirade from Krishn. 7. Radhaya was my son. Dhritarashtra appointed Vidur, Sanjay, and Dhaumya to make all arrangements for the cremation of the great heroes who were lying on the battlefield. It was all over soon. Yudhishthir, accompanied by Dhritarashtra, and all the others, turned towards the banks of the river Ganga to offer the funeral oblations to the dead. They were all there, also Gandhari, Kunti and Draupadi. Now the men laid aside all their jewels and silks. They were wearing the simplest of clothes. Their immense chests were covered by thin upper cloths. The dismal procession wended its way slowly towards the banks of the river Ganga. Kunti's condition was pitiable. 3 days back Radhaya was killed by her Arjun. There was great celebration in the Pandav camp. She had heard about it from Sanjay. When Sanjay was telling Dhritarashtra about the war, about the death of Radhaya, she heard it. Her heart was burning with grief. She could not tell anyone about it. She could not talk about the wound in her heart. She had to be silent. Today on the battlefield, she saw the dead form of her firstborn. She would not allow herself to faint. Krishn was watching all the while. She looked at Radhaya, and she saw his wife weeping over her lord. She saw that too, and still she did not speak. Now, at the end of all this, she was walking with all of them to see the funeral oblations paid on the banks of the sacred river Ganga. It was the same Ganga who took her son away from her years back. Still Ganga flowed as placidly as she did on that memorable day when she set the wooden box afloat on the bosom of the river. It looked like yesterday. Kunti was watching the men give their final offerings to the departed souls. Radhaya had no son to do it for him. They were all dead. He was still an orphan as he was on the day she had abandoned him. Her heart was ready to burst with the great sorrow. She burned with self-condemnation for the great injustice she had done to her child. Kunti squared her shoulders. She set her lips in a firm line. She had to do it. She owed at least this to Radhaya. She walked with firm steps to her son Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir had just finished his offerings to the sons of Draupadi and all the others. Arjun's tears were still in his eyes. He had just made the offerings for his dear beloved Abhimanyu. Now Kunti would do something which would make all this pale into just nothing. She went to Yudhishthir and placed her hand on his back. He turned round and said, "Yes, mother." "What is it? Why did you call me?" Kunti had to swallow hard to prevent a sob from escaping her lips. She said, "There is still another person left. You have to make the offerings for him also, my son." Yudhishthir looked at her. Her eyes were red with unshed tears. All the people who had assembled there paused and looked at the scene between mother and son. The brothers of Yudhishthir crowded around them and stood with their brows knit to guess who this other person could be. Krishn, the one man who knew, stood and watched Kunti with great compassion in his eyes. She had kept the secret well. She had not announced it during the war. She was silent even after Radhaya died, because it would have broken the heart of Yudhishthir. He would have stopped fighting and gone back to the forest. What Kunti was doing now was the right thing. Krishn listened. Yudhishthir said, "One person more. I do not understand. I remember the dead only too well. Surely I am not such an ingrate as to forget those who died for me. Who is this person to whom an offering by me is due?" Kunti said, "It is Radhaya. You must make the offerings for him too." Yudhishthir was astounded. He said, "Radhaya? But mother, why should I do it for Radhaya? He is a Sutputra. The funeral rites must be performed by his father since his sons are dead. I am a Kshatriya. Why do you ask me to do it for a Sut? For Radhaya the Sutputra, our archenemy. Why should I do it, mother? Please tell me. Why do you look so unhappy?" A moment passed. Kunti was dumb with the agony in her heart. She took a deep breath and said, "Yudhishthir, you must do it because Radhaya is a Kshatriya and not a Sutputra." "Not a Sutputra. Radhaya not a Sutputra," shouted all of them, all at the same time. The cry was taken up by everyone there. Radhaya was a Kshatriya. Radhaya was not a Sutputra. Everyone was amazed to hear it. Yudhishthir said, "But mother, you knew not a thing about Radhaya. How do you know that he is a Kshatriya? Then you must know who he is. Why should I offer the funeral oblations for Radhaya? I am puzzled by your words. Tell me, mother, who was the father of the great Radhaya?" Kunti said, "Radhaya was the son of Surya. Radhaya's mother was a young girl. Surya gave her this child. It was born with the Kovach and the Kundalas. His mother was afraid of the censure of the world. You see, she was a maiden in her father's house. So she had to keep the secret buried in her heart. She placed the child in a wooden box and set it afloat on this same river, this Ganga. The child was taken up by Atiruth, and he gave it to his wife Radha. That is how he got the name Radhaya, and that was the name he loved. He would not take any other name. His mother was a princess. She did this injustice to her firstborn. She has several children, but her heart is empty because of this." Yudhishthir and all the others were listening to this recital. Everything else was forgotten in the excitement of listening to the wonderful story. Yudhishthir said, "Mother, who is the mother of Radhaya? Who is that woman who was so heartless that she could abandon her child in the great river Ganga the moment it was born? Who is the woman who ruined the life of that great man? You must be knowing her since you are telling us all the details of the crime. Who is she, mother?" All eyes were turned on her. Kunti looked at all of them. She looked at Krishn. He was looking at her with infinite pity in his eyes. Kunti looked straight into the eyes of Yudhishthir and said, "That woman is still alive. I am that woman. Radhaya was my son, my firstborn." She fell down in a dead faint. Vidur hurried to her side even as he did on the day of the tournament, when she fainted at the sight of Radhaya. Yudhishthir could not think at all. He stood staring at all of them. He kept repeating, "Radhaya is my elder brother, and we have killed him." He looked at Arjun. Arjun rushed to him. He cried out, "What have I done, my lord? What have I done? How can I live after this? I have killed my brother. My brother, I have killed him." Arjun could not stand up. He sat down on the ground and he was shouting as one bereft of his senses, "I have killed my brother, and I gloated over my brother's death." He fell down in a faint. Krishn came to him and Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir's grief was dreadful. He was trembling like a man with an ague. His eyes became bloodshot. Bheem sat down beside Arjun. He was too stunned to think. He was like a child which had suddenly become old. Bheem thought of the day of the tournament. He remembered the moment when he had just discovered that Radhaya was a Sutputra. Bheem had said, "Listen. You, a Sutputra, are not fit to be killed by Arjun. You are not fit to hold a bow in your hand. Get thee hence and take up a whip which will suit you better." Bheem remembered Duryodhan's words. He had said, "As for this young man, it makes me pity you for your lack of understanding. He is full of the qualities that are found in a Kshatriya, and only in a Kshatriya. Can you not see that a tiger can never be born of a poor meek deer? Can you not feel that he is a Kshatriya? I have made him king of the Angas. But I know that he does not deserve this. He deserves to be lord of the entire world. He is born to be great. You are not good enough or great enough to recognize him." Duryodhan's words burned into his mind now. Yes, they were not great enough to recognize the greatness of Radhaya. Bheem was sobbing as if his entire frame were shattered. He could not speak a word. There was dumb misery and nothing else. Nakul thought of the duel he fought with Radhaya. He remembered the words of Radhaya. He had said, "Someday you will be proud of this duel you fought with me. Someday you will be proud of the fact that Radhaya insulted you." Yes, that moment of humiliation would now be the most treasured moment in his life. It was not possible for Satdev to forget Radhaya and his fight with him. He was remembering the sneer on his lips and his unruffled manner. The Pandavas were prostrate with grief. Kunti was revived with water and other things. For the first time in his life, Yudhishthir did not pay any attention to his mother. He could not look at the woman who had done this injustice to Radhaya and to the Pandavas. He went and sat with Arjun and Krishn. Yudhishthir remembered the day when Radhaya died. He remembered every moment of that day. He remembered calling Radhaya Sutputra. Yudhishthir turned to his mother. He asked her, "Did Radhaya know about it? Did he know who he was?" "Yes," said Krishn. Yudhishthir turned his eyes on Krishn. All the Pandavas looked at Krishn. "Did you know about it, Krishn?" asked Yudhishthir. "Yes," was the reply. It was not possible for them to speak a single word after that. Radhaya knew that he was not a Sutputra. He knew that he was the son of Surya and Kunti. And yet he allowed his own brothers to taunt him with that name. Yudhishthir beat his head in futile anger. He said, "When I heard that Radhaya was dead, I ran to the battlefield to see if he was really dead. I was so happy to see him dead. Mother, how could you do this to us, loving us as you did?" It was only now that Yudhishthir saw his mother's face. She looked so unhappy. He did not want to speak a word more. She had suffered enough. Yudhishthir went and stood on the banks of the river Ganga. It looked as though the funeral oblations were being paid with just the tears of Yudhishthir. The death of Abhimanyu and the death of the sons of Draupadi were forgotten in this great calamity which had befallen them. They had killed their brother. That was the only thought that was in their minds as the Pandavas came away from the banks of the river Ganga. The procession wended its way towards the city. Gandhari, Kunti and Draupadi were sharing the same grief. They had lost their sons and they were inconsolable. Krishn walked along with them. He left them all to their grief. Krishn and Satyaki were walking a few steps behind the procession. 8. Yudhishthir's unhappiness. They had to stay away from the city for the duration of a month. They could not go back to the city until the funeral rites had been performed. All of them stayed in temporary houses built on the banks of the Ganga. Vyas, Narad and many other rishis came to see Yudhishthir. Narad spoke to him. He said, "Why are you plunged in woe? By the grace of Krishn, and with the help of your valiant brothers and the Panchals, you are now lord of the world. Your years of suffering are ended. I am happy to offer you my felicitations on your success." Yudhishthir's grief broke out. He said, "My lord, I am not destined to be happy. All the happiness that ought to have been ours is gone because we have been told by our mother that Radhaya was our brother. How could this have been allowed to happen? My mother tells me that she met him once before the war. She asked him to come to her and to his brothers. But he would not. Krishn had asked him. But he would not let down his friend and master Duryodhan. Depending on Radhaya, he had begun the war. It was against the nature of my brother to be disloyal to his king and master and friend. He suffered agonies when he knew that the Pandavas were his brothers. But he would not swerve from the path of duty. Such a man was our brother, and we have killed him. I was happy when he was killed. I called him a Sutputra when I fought a duel with him. He defeated me and he insulted me. What dread fate is this, my lord, that separated him from us? He knew all the time that I was his brother, and he did not want to let us know. I remember the day in the court in Hastinapur. Draupadi was being insulted by all of them, by Radhaya more than the others. I was wild with him. I was standing with my head hung down in shame. I turned my eyes towards him. I could not look up. I just looked at his feet, and all my anger vanished. I could not be angry with him. His feet were like the blessed feet of my mother. I was intrigued by the resemblance. For years I have always remembered this, and again I have tried to solve this teasing problem. How could the feet of Radhaya, the Sutputra, resemble those of my mother? My lord, when I realize now why his feet were like those of my mother, my heart is ready to break into a million flinders. How can I be happy after killing this great man, this Radhaya, who should have been the lord of this Kuru kingdom? I cannot find any solace in anything. My mother tells me that he gave her a boon of his own accord. He told her that he would not kill any of the Pandavas except Arjun. He just had to fight that duel with Arjun. That was the only way he could please Duryodhan. I now realize why he did not kill Bheem on the day when Jayadratha fell. He had Bheem at his mercy. He went away without killing him. But he had to insult him. That night he met Sahdev in a duel. The next day, Nakul. On the last day of his life he met me in a duel. We were all allowed to live. He did not kill us because he would not. What a noble and loving brother we had, and Arjun killed him when he was not ready to fight. I can never forgive myself for this outrage. We have been the most unrighteous people that fought in the war. Narad comforted him. He said that Radhaya could not have been killed by anyone. It was the curse of two Brahmins and the interference of Indra that made the killing of Radhaya possible. He told the Pandavas the story of Radhaya's life in the full detail of all its tragic splendor. It was the story of a noble soul which purified all those who were fortunate enough to have been associated with him. It chastened the Pandavas. It made them humble. It made them realize that the ways of providence are mysterious. But the grief never left their hearts. It was a raw wound which would never heal. Yudhishthir could never forgive his mother for the injustice done to Radhaya, and to all of them. He cursed all womankind. He said that no woman would be able to keep secrets from then on. It was because Kunti kept the secret so well that this calamity had happened. There was no way of comforting the Pandavas. Yudhishthir lost all interest in the kingdom that they had won after so much pain and bloodshed. He almost decided to abandon everything and go back to the forest. It was not possible to convince him that it was a wrong attitude. He would sit and mourn the death of all those who had been killed in the war. He blamed himself for everything now. Bheem, Arjun, Nakul, Sahadev, Draupadi, all tried so often to convince him that his attitude was wrong, that he should not be so depressed. But it was all to no purpose. They were nearly desperate. Yudhishthir was sunk in woe. Vyas, Narad and so many others made him realize that it was all wrong. Yudhishthir began to throw off the mantle of sorrow gradually. It was not easy for Vyas to change his attitude. But finally Yudhishthir came to realize his duty as a king. He was made to see that a man who is a king has no right to his personal griefs. He belonged to the people. He was not allowed to have an individuality of his own. To the people the king was God, but to the king his subjects represented God. It was his duty to rule them well. Beyond that, a king had no existence. He had to live just for the sake of the people. He must be a father to them. It was their due. Yudhishthir realized all this. He said, "My mind is not clouded any more. My lord, I have passed through the dark valley and have come out into the sunlight. Please teach me the rules of conduct that a king should follow. Please tell me the rules of governing a kingdom. I do not know many of these things. It is up to you all to guide me in the right path. I have taken upon myself this great responsibility. I must know everything about ruling the kingdom. I want to do it as well as my ancestors did. Please teach me." Vyas smiled happily and said, "Yudhishthir, I am happy to see you take so much trouble about the ruling of the kingdom. It is laudable. But you are asking the wrong person. I am a man who has never ruled. I am one who has nothing to do with the kingdom on the earth. I am ignorant in these matters. I suggest that you ask your grandfather. He is the greatest authority on these matters." Ganga, when she took him with her, wanted to fit him for the role he was to play, a king of the lunar race. He was to have succeeded Shantanu. He was taught political science by Brihaspati and Sakra, the divine preceptors. There is no one to equal Devrath in this. He was fitted out to play a role which he could never play, thanks to the selfishness of his father. He has never had a chance to tell anyone about all that. Devrath has lived in heaven before he came down to the earth. He has been in the company of gods. I will tell you the greatness of your grandfather. Brihaspati was his tutor in political science. Ganga, the favorite of the gods, is his dear mother. They took so much trouble to make the son of Ganga well versed in all that a king should know. Sakra, the guru of the gods and the Asuras, taught him the rules of conduct. Bhargav was his tutor in archery. The Vedas and the Vedanas were taught him by Vashishtha. As for his knowledge of renunciation, Markandeya taught him that. Devrath knows the secret beyond the veil of death. It will be your good fortune if you can hear the great Bheeshm talk on all these things. He will be happy to tell you. Nothing will please a teacher so much as a willing and humble disciple. Go now to that great man and ask him. Go to Bheeshm, who has been spending his last days on a bed of arrows." Yudhishthir said, "My lord, how can I go and stand in the presence of that great man? I am the cause of the destruction of my cousins. Having committed such a sin, how can I have the courage to enter his presence?" Krishn said, "Do not be so sensitive about what happened, Yudhishthir. It is known to all that fate was responsible for this and not you. Go to Bheeshm, listen to the words of Vyas. It is for the good of the kingdom which you are to rule for many years more. Bheeshm is a great man. He knew the future of the Kauravas. Do not have any doubts about it. Listen to Vyas. Taking the advice of all of them, Yudhishthir decided to go to his grandfather for instructions on how to rule his kingdom. 9. The crowning of Yudhishthir. The month was over. They could now go back to Hastinapur. The mind of Yudhishthir had realized peace. He was not unhappy anymore. The days and nights he had spent with the wise rishis had given him santi, peace, which he had been longing for all these years. He now understood the true value of things. His mind was cured of the fever of unrest, and he was happy. A sensitive man like Yudhishthir could not reconcile himself to ruling the kingdom, which he had won after wading through a river of blood, the blood of his cousins. It was only after the comforting company of the great rishis that he realized his real position. He was happy now. He was almost looking forward to taking up the duties of a ruler. Yudhishthir wanted to fit himself for this role. The suggestion of Vyas appealed to him. He decided to leave for Hastinapur. They all set out for the capital city. With the old king Dhritarashtra in the lead, they began their journey to the city. It was a magnificent procession. The city was reached soon. The people saw the new king Yudhishthir in a chariot drawn by 16 white bullocks. Bheem was holding the reins in his hands. Arjun was holding the white umbrella over his head. Nakul and Sahdev were holding the chamras on either side of the king. It was a splendid spectacle. The people had had time to forget their recent woe. A month had gone by. They were happy to welcome the king to Hastinapur. In a chariot following that of the king Yudhishthir was seated Yuyatsu, the only surviving son of Dhritarashtra. This was followed by the chariot of Krishn, who had Satyaki with him. The women of the royal house were carried in palanquins carried by bearers. There was a grand and impressive procession of horses and many elephants and footmen. It was a happy day for everyone. Yudhishthir, preceded by Dhritarashtra and followed by the others, entered the magnificent Sabha of the Kuru kings. He was honored by all the citizens and Brahmins who recited verses blessing the Pandavas. Krishn led Yudhishthir to the throne. Krishn seated him on the illustrious throne of the Pauravas. Krishn's eyes were raining tears. His promise had been fulfilled today. He had taken an oath that he would place Yudhishthir on the throne, and he had achieved this great task. Jeweled seats were placed facing the throne. Satyaki and Krishn took their seats. Bheem and Arjun seated themselves on either side of the king. On ivory seats by the side of these brothers were seated Nakul and Sahdev. Kunti was seated along with Sahdev, her favorite child. They shared the same seat. Individual seats were provided for Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. Vidur and Yuyatsu were seated by their side. The king had been crowned. There were musical instruments making sweet music. The Brahmins chanted the Vedas. It was a thrilling moment. The chief men of the city came to the presence of the king and spoke formal words of welcome. Yudhishthir was looking like the moon in the midst of stars. He replied in suitable terms and then spoke. He said, "I have been greatly honored by the citizens. I will try to the best of my ability to be a good king. I am hoping that my uncle will still be the king, as he has been all these years. He is our father. He is the father of this kingdom. I will be just his servant, and I will try to assist him in ruling the kingdom. My brothers will all help me." Yudhishthir dismissed all the citizens after honoring them duly. Yudhishthir crowned Bheem as the Yuvaraja, the heir apparent. Vidur was appointed the minister. He had the charge of the defense of the kingdom. He was also the personal counselor to the king. Sanjay was made to take charge of the finance of the government. Nakul was to take charge of the army and its maintenance. Arjun was the commander of the army. He was in charge of foreign affairs. He had to defend the kingdom from foreign invasions. Dhaumya continued to be the high priest. Satyav was the personal protector of the king. He had to be with him always. Yuyutsu was asked to manage the several provinces and also to attend to the personal wants of the old king Dhritarashtra. Krishn was watching with admiration the efficiency of the king. 10. Bheeshm on the bed of arrows. The final funeral rites for the departed heroes were performed in a very grand manner. After it was all over, Yudhishthir came to Krishn and stood before him with his palms folded. He said, "My lord, you have given me back my kingdom. For my sake you have done so many tasks. In your affection for me, you have played the role of a man, you, who must be worshipped as the eternal soul. You are the Lord of Lords, and you have pretended to be a man, and to be affected by the joys and sorrows which troubled us. With us you have wept, and with us you have smiled. You have shown us the way to truth, and you have been our guide. I do not know what to say. My heart is full of emotion. I have always followed your advice. I fall at your feet and wash them with my tears. That is all I can do in return for all that you have done for us." Krishn lifted up Yudhishthir. He spoke sweet and gentle words to him and to all the brothers. The next day in the morning, Yudhishthir came to the presence of Krishn. He found him to be in a thoughtful mood. Seeing the king, Krishn smiled at him and spoke to him. The king said, "What makes you so thoughtful, Krishn?" Krishn said, "I was thinking of your grandfather, Bheeshm. He has reached the last few days of his life on this earth. You wanted to learn so much from him. I was thinking of going to see him. He is calling me in his mind. I wanted to ask you to accompany me. That was the reason for my abstraction." Yudhishthir said, "We will do what you suggest." Krishn looked at Satyaki and said, "Satyaki, ask Derek to prepare my chariot. You must also prepare yourself. We must go to the field where the Kuru ancient is lying on a bed of arrows." Krishn's chariot was ready. Derek came and announced it. The entire group left for the field. In several chariots they went to the battlefield. They abandoned their chariots and went on foot to the presence of the great Bheeshm. He looked like the setting sun. Krishn went forward and spoke to Bheeshm. He was feeling so unhappy to see the great man suffering so much pain and agony. He sat by his side and spoke gentle words. He said, "How are you faring, my lord? The power you have to hold death at bay is not given to me. Your strength of will is amazing. If a needle point pricks me, I cannot bear the pain. How can you bear the pain caused by 1,000 arrows which are lodged in your body? There is no one like you in this world. You are the home of all knowledge. You have been the pupil of Brihaspati, Sakra, Vashishtha and Markandeya. You are the storehouse of all wisdom. You are the greatest hero. You have always followed the path of righteousness. You are the foremost of the Vasus. You are the greatest man that has ever graced the world of men. You must now pacify Yudhishthir, who is grieved because he was the cause of the death of his cousins. He has been pacified by Vyas himself, and he wants to rule the kingdom as well as his ancestors did. You must teach him all that you know. You must make him shake off this sorrow and rule the kingdom properly. You are the only person who can help him." Bheeshm heard the words of Krishn. He raised his head a little and looked at Krishn. A smile hovered at the corner of his lips. He said, "My lord, you are the eternal soul that pervades this universe. You are the home of all knowledge and all wisdom. Tell me what I should do. I do not know how long I will have to live. I have lost count of time. I have cleared my debt to Satyavati. I am waiting for the time when the sun's chariot changes its direction and proceeds to the north. I want you to tell me when I can see your Visvarup. I am impatient to see your form, my lord." Krishn said, "Bheeshm, you have 65 days more to live on this world. I will be by your side when you give up this bondage to reach your home. When you go, all that immense knowledge will go with you, and no one will be able to get it. I want you to talk to Yudhishthir about all that you know. You can do it." Bheeshm said, "Krishn, you are trying to laugh at me. Your words are full of love, but when you, the home of all knowledge, when you are here, how can I dare to talk about dharma and conduct to Yudhishthir? If I talk, it will be impertinent. It will be like a student trying to talk in the presence of his guru. It is wrong, my lord. Krishn smiled and said, you are very modest. It is becoming that you should speak so humbly of yourself. But I want you to talk to Yudhishthir. Bheeshm said, Krishn, I am weak with my wounds. My pain is unbearable. My memory has become clouded. You are asking me to remember things which I learnt when I was in heaven with my mother. I do not think I have strength in my body or in my mind to undertake this task which you want to assign to me. Krishn said, I will grant you a boon. This pain and this weakness will not be there till you die. Your memory will be unclouded. Your perception will be as keen as the blade of a sword. You will be able to unravel the most intricate knots of the mysteries of the universe. You will know all that there is to know. The heavens rained flowers on Bheeshm and Krishn when these words were spoken. Krishn got up after saluting Bheeshm. He took leave of him saying, we will return tomorrow. The night passed pleasantly for all of them. Krishn slept a dreamless sleep after so many days. Early in the morning he sent Satyaki to Yudhishthir. Satyaki went to the king and said, Krishn is ready to see the great Bheeshm. He wants to know if you are ready to leave for the field. At once Yudhishthir and his brothers set out for the field, accompanied by Krishn and Satyaki. They hurried to the presence of Bheeshm. He now looked as glorious and fresh as the rising Sunday. Krishn sat by his side and asked him how he was. Bheeshm said, Krishn, I am free of all pain and the agony from the moment you granted me the boon. I am feeling alert mentally too. I am feeling immensely pleased with myself. But Krishn, I want to ask a question of you. Why do you want me to give this discourse on the dharma of a kshatriya? Why do you not speak to Yudhishthir yourself? I want to know the reason for this. Krishn smiled a gentle smile and said, you are right. I can tell him everything. But I have decided to bring you everlasting glory. I want the world to remember you always, forever and ever. The world of men will hereafter take your words to be as sacred as the Vedas. Every action of man in the days to come will be dictated by the rules set down by you. A man is said to live in this world as long as his fame lives. I want you to live forever. That is why I am asking you to speak. Bheeshm's tears flowed slowly and silently. He could not speak. This love Krishn had for him was too sacred for him to talk about it. He composed himself and said, tell Yudhishthir to ask me any question he wants. I am ready to answer him. Krishn said, Yudhishthir feels guilty. He does not dare to come to your presence since he thinks that he is the cause of the destruction of all the kshatriyas and his own cousins. Bheeshm smiled tenderly and called Yudhishthir to him. He placed his old hands on his head and said, my child, the duty of a kshatriya is to fight and kill. You had to kill. You have been a real kshatriya. You must not grieve for having done your duty. Come now, Krishn tells me that your understanding is clouded because of the many doubts you have about true conduct. I hear that you want to learn the art of ruling the kingdom well. I will tell you everything, my child. It was taught to me by the great masters, and I will impart it all to you with the grace of this Lord who is pleased to walk on this earth calling himself Krishn. 11. Talks on the dharma of a king. Yudhishthir asked, it has been said by the wise that kingly duties constitute the highest science. Please tell me about the duties of a king. Bheeshm was immensely pleased with the humility and eagerness of Yudhishthir. He smiled at him and said, my child, I am only too eager to tell you all that you want to know. A king's first duty is to worship the gods and the Brahmins. A king should essentially be a man of action. You might have heard from many that destiny rules a king. It is a fallacy in reasoning if you think so. Destiny does play a part. I grant that. But without action a king can never help destiny to play her part. Destiny is powerful but action is equally powerful. Both are potent. But to me it seems that action is the more potent of the two. It is action which shapes the destiny. The next, or rather, the next equally important duty of a king is truth. If you want to inspire confidence in the minds of your subjects, you should always be truthful. All accomplishments find a home in a king. His behavior should be above reproach. Self-restraint, humility and righteousness are qualities which you have to look for in a king if he has to be successful. He should have his passions under perfect control. Justice should be the second nature of a king. There are three more things which a king should cultivate. He should know how to conceal his own weaknesses carefully. By weakness is meant the weaknesses in his kingdom. He should take the trouble to find out the weaknesses in his enemies, and he should be very careful to be secretive about his plans. A king's conduct should be straightforward. Another danger for a king is mildness. He should not be too mild. He will then be disregarded. The subjects will not have enough respect for him and his words. Again, he should avoid the other extreme. He should not be too fierce because then the subjects will be afraid of him, and that is not a happy state of affairs. A king should know the art of choosing servants. He should have compassion as part of his mental makeup, but he should guard against too forgiving a nature. The lowest of men will take advantage of him, and his nature if they are considered weak. Alertness is a great necessity for a king. He should study his foes and his friends too, incessantly. A king must consider that his first duty is to his subjects. He should guard them as a mother guards the child in her womb. Will any mother have thoughts of pleasing herself when her child is in her womb? All her thoughts will be bent only on the child and its welfare. Even so, a king should subordinate his desires and wishes to those of his subjects. Their welfare should be his only concern. A king should be careful not to place implicit confidence in anyone. His innermost thoughts must be concealed from even his nearest and dearest, and he should not tell anyone about his decisions. A king should be wise in dealing with 6 problems. The first is making peace with a foe who is stronger. The next consideration is making war on one who is equal to him in strength. Invading the country of one who is weaker in his next problem. He should use his discrimination when he makes a decision about these things. He should be prepared to seek protection in his fort if his position is weak. The most important work of a king is to cause dissensions among the chief office-bearers in his enemy's country. He should have clever spies at his service and find out the secrets of the enemy. He should bribe and cajole the officers of the enemy and win them over to his side. A king should be pleasant in speech. He should have about him men who are like him in nature and in noble qualities. The only difference between the king and his officers should be the white umbrella. The best king is one whose subjects live in freedom and happiness as they do in their father's house. Peace will be theirs and contentment. There will then be no wickedness, no pretense, no dishonesty, and no envy. The very core of a king's duty is the protection of his subjects and their happiness. It is not easy. To secure the happiness of his people, he should use diverse methods. A king should be proficient in the art of choosing honest men to hold important offices. Skill, cleverness, and truth are all 3 necessary in a king. Old and fallen buildings and living houses should be renovated by him if he has to win the good opinion of his subjects. He should know how to use his powers in inflicting corporal punishments and fines on miscreants. The king should remember that his treasury should always be full. Supervision of the work of all his officers should be done by the king himself. He should never trust the guardians of the city or fort implicitly. He must produce disloyalty among the people in a hostile country, and he must have friends and allies there. He should amass troops, and this should be done in secret. A king can never protect his kingdom by candor and by simplicity. A king should be both candid and crooked. He must employ crookedness and wrong acts when he wants to subdue the enemy. all these things should be concealed behind a candid and open exterior. Yudhishthir, how did the word Rajan come into use when a king is addressed? A king is like any other human being on the earth. His body and limbs are like those of anyone else. His understanding, his senses, are similar to those of many others. He has the same joys and griefs, the same number of years to live on the earth, like anybody else. How then did it happen that he is considered different? This world is made up of men who are far superior to him in intelligence, bravery, and all accomplishments. And yet, this one man rules the others, though they are superior to him. Why should it be the rule that one man is worshipped by all the others? Bheeshm, I will tell you. In the beginning there was no king. There was no punishment. These two were not needed then. Men were all righteous and each man protected the other. As time passed on, however, the hearts of men began to be invaded by errors. Once error enters the heart, the mind gets clouded and the sense of right and wrong begins to wane. It was even so with the men of distant times. Covetousness was the first guest in their hearts. When covetousness came into life, men began to want things which did not belong to them. The next passion to be born was lust. Lust can never exist alone. It has to have a companion, and so wrath came into existence. As soon as these terrible passions found places in the hearts of men, righteousness had to beat a hasty retreat. Along with this confusion, happened another great calamity. The Vedas disappeared. Righteousness was completely lost to the world. The gods were then overcome with fear. They went to Brahma Pitamaha and said, "Look on the world you have created, my lord. It is threatened with destruction. Please save it and save us." Brahma assured them that he would find a way. He then composed a treatise composed of 100,000 lessons. He treated of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. He dealt with them in great detail. He formulated the rules for chastisement. The main features of this treatise on chastisement dealt with punishment of two kinds, open and secret punishment. It treated of conservation of wealth by traders and merchants, growth of penance of the ascetics, destruction of thieves and wicked men. There was a branch dealing with all the religious observances, and another dealt with the extensive subject of legislation and the behavior that is expected of counselors, of spies, of secret agents, envoys, and conciliation. All the many ways and means by which men may be prevented from deviating from the path of righteousness and honesty were described in it. After composing it, Brahma said, "For the good of the world and for the establishment and propagation of dharma, artha, and kama, I have composed this. Assisted by chastisement, this will protect the world." Men are mostly led by chastisement, and so this treatise will be called Dandaniti. It was studied and abridged by several of the gods, the first of them being Shankar. Finally, when it was to be given to the world, Sakra of great wisdom thought of the brevity of the life of men on earth, and made the work much shorter. It contained just 1,000 lessons. The gods then appeared before Vishnu and said, "Lord, indicate to us a man on the world who deserves to be superior to the rest." Narayan said, "I will enter the body of one man and he, as well as all those who are born in his line, will be lords of the world." There was a king called Vena. From his right arm was born a man who was like a second Indra in his looks and godliness. He was born with a coat of mail and all the weapons. He was proficient in all the arts and the Vedas. The rishis made him the ruler of the world. Sakra was his priest. There was current among men the feeling that he was the eighth son of Vishnu himself. His name was Prithu. He made the surface of the earth level. Vishnu and the deities assembled to crown Prithu king. The earth took a form and came to him with tributes of gems and jewels. Prithu milked the earth in the form of a cow, and made her yield 7 kinds of crops for the food of all living creatures. He made all men regard them as the foremost of all things. Because he pleased all the people he was called Rajan. Because he healed the wounds of afflicted people he was called Kshatriya. And again, because the earth became celebrated for the prevalence of virtue during his reign, she was called Prithvi. Vishnu entered the body of that monarch. A pure man, when his punya becomes exhausted, descends from heaven to earth and is born as a king. Such a person is indeed great, and is a portion of Vishnu on earth. He has a heritage of divine intelligence, and he is superior to all the others. He is established by the gods, and he is not to be slighted. This is the reason why the world cannot command him, but he can command the world. This is why the multitude has to obey his words of command, though he is like anybody else. Yudhishthir, what are the principal duties of the subjects? Bheeshm, their first duty is to elect a king and perform his coronation. For the sake of the treasury, the subjects should give 1/50th of their animals and precious metals and a 10th part of their grains. From among them they should choose those who are proficient in the use of weapons, and help the king in the maintenance of the army. A 4th part of the merits of the people will go to the king, and a 4th part of their evil also. A disciple behaves with humility in the presence of his preceptor. Even so a subject should humble himself before his king. A king who is honored by his subjects will naturally be respected and feared by his foes. Yudhishthir, what other special duties should a king discharge? Bheeshm, a king should first know how to bring himself under subjugation. When he has achieved this, he should then try to subdue his foes. The conquest of the 5 senses is considered to be the greatest victory. It is only such a king that is capable of conquering his enemies. A king should have an immense number of soldiers in his forts, cities, frontiers, and all important spots. A king's thoughts, actions, decisions, and spies should be kept secret from everyone, especially the enemy. His spies should look like imbeciles. Or they should seem as though they are blind and deaf. They should be capable, and they should be wise. The king should ascertain that before employing them. They should be hardy, able to bear privations like cold, heat, and hunger. The king should set spies on his counselors, on his friends, and even on his sons. His spies should be strangers to each other. The moment a king realizes that his foe is stronger, he should strive to make peace. If he is sure of his strength, he should collect a large army and march against the person who has no allies and friends, or who is engaged in war against another. The king should know how to take them by surprise. He should not hesitate to afflict the kingdom of the enemy with weapons, fire, and poison. The king should take 1/6 of the income of his subjects. This is for the maintenance of the army for their protection. A king's subjects are his children. But he should guard against compassion while punishing them for their wrong behavior. Honest men who are absolutely trustworthy should be appointed to administer justice. The state has her strong foundation only upon the proper administration of justice. There need be no doubt whatever about the truth that it is the king that makes the age, and not the age which makes the king. When a king rules relying entirely and strictly on the science of chastisement, Krita Yuga, or Satya Yuga, the foremost of ages, is said to set in. Righteousness is prevalent during Krita Yuga. Unrighteousness does not even exist then. The earth yields crops without even waiting to be tilled. Herbs and plants grow luxuriantly and in abundance. Diseases are not found at all, and all men live long. The seasons are all delightful. There is peace and nothing but peace on earth. When the king relies on 3 of the 4 parts of this Dandaniti, Triteya Yuga sets in. A 4th part of them is gone, and an equal portion of Adharm sets in. The earth does yield crops, but she waits for the tillage. The herbs and plants need to be nurtured. The yield is not spontaneous. When the king follows the Dandaniti only by half, the age that sets in is Dwapara. Righteousness is diminished by half, and the void is filled up by unrighteousness. The earth, even when tilled, yields only half her crop. When the king ignores the edict of Brahma, and begins to oppress his people, the age is Kali. Unrighteousness becomes rampant and nothing of righteousness is seen. The world becomes the home of anarchy. Diseases appear and men die prematurely. The clouds do not rain in season and the crops fail. The king is the cause of the yugas. Yudhishthir, of whose wealth is the king said to be the lord? Bheeshm, the Vedas have declared that the wealth of all persons belongs To the king, with the exception of the Brahmins. The king's duty is to support all the Brahmins. Yudhishthir, nothing, not even the smallest act, can be accomplished by a single man. He has to have assistance. This is all the more true when one thinks of ruling a kingdom. So much of it depends on the minister of the king. Tell me, what are the characteristics of a minister and his duties? Which kind of man deserves the king's entire confidence? Bheeshm, a king has friends, and these can be classified into 4 types. The first is the man whose object coincides with that of the king. The second is the man who is devoted to the king. The third is one related to the king by birth. The fourth is one whom the king has placated by gifts. There is a fifth, and that is a righteous man who firmly serves one, and not both sides. He belongs to the side where there is righteousness. To this man the king should never confide plans which are in danger of being disapproved. A king who wants to be successful has to be righteous, and unrighteous too according to circumstances. And so, he cannot be too careful in regard to these friends. A wicked man may appear to be honest, and an honest man is likely to become dishonest. No man can always be of the same mind all the time. No one should be trusted completely. Entire reliance on the ministers is not wise. And again, a want of trust is also wrong. A king's policy, therefore, should be trust as well as mistrust. A king should fear his kinsman as he would death himself. A kinsman can never bear to see the prosperity of the king. At the same time, a king without kinsmen is unfortunate indeed. The policy is, mistrusting them at heart, but behaving with them as though he trusts them completely. Yudhishthir, what should be the characteristics of the legislators, the ministers of war, the courtier, and the counselors of a king? Bheeshm, the legislators should be men who are modest, self-restrained, truthful and sincere, and they should have the courage to speak what is proper. The ministers for war should be those who are always by the side of the king. They should be very brave. They should belong to the higher caste, and be learned and affectionate to a fault as far as the king is concerned. A courtier should be of high lineage. He should always be honored by the king. He should be a man who has the king's interests always at heart. He should never abandon the king whatever the circumstances may be. The officers of the army should again be of high lineage, born in the country of the king, possessed of wisdom, great learning, and beauty of form and features. They should be of excellent behavior, and they should be devoted to the king. For Brahmins learned in the Vedas, possessed of great dignity, and belonging to the Snataka order, and of pure unblemished behavior, 8 Kshatriyas, all of whom should be very strong physically and proficient in the use of all the weapons, 21 Vaishyas, all of whom should be wealthy, 3 Sudras, all of whom should possess humility and pure conduct, and 1 man of the Sut caste. These should be the ministers of the king. Every one of them should be 50 or more years old. Punishment should be given to offenders according to the immensity of the offense. The wealthy should be fined and their property should be confiscated, while loss of liberty should be the punishment for the poor offender. Wicked conduct should be punished by inflicting corporal punishment. The king should levy taxes, but they should never be so high as to hurt the subjects. He should know how to milk his kingdom. He should be like a bee gathering honey from the flowers. He should be a leech which draws blood mildly without the victim being conscious of it. He should behave like a tigress with her cubs while handling his subjects. She catches them with her teeth, and yet never hurts them. Yudhishthir, how should a king behave? Bheeshm, righteousness is the watchword of a king. Nothing is greater than that in this world. A righteous king can easily conquer the entire world. His counselors should all be pure in heart and pure in mind. Malice should have no place in the heart of a king. His senses should be perfectly under control. He should use his intelligence and he will then be glorious, swelling in greatness like the ocean fed with the waters of 1,000 rivers. Yudhishthir, the path of duty is very long. It has 100 branches. Tell me, what are the duties that have to be practiced? Bheeshm, the worship of mother, father and preceptor, these are the most important duties. Attending to this duty fits a king to acquire great fame, and the heavens. These three should be worshipped and their commands should be obeyed implicitly. They are like the three fires that have to be worshipped daily. Serving the father helps one to cross this world. Serving the mother transports him to the heavens. Serving the preceptor one attains the region of Brahma. Yudhishthir, I want to know about dharma, artha and kama. The course of life proceeds onwards. Which of these three helps to steady that course in the right direction? Bheeshm, the three exist together, side by side, when a man amasses wealth, always taking care to walk in the path of dharma. Wealth has its root in virtue, and pleasure is said to be the fruit of wealth. All of these again, are firmly planted in will. Objects exist in this world for the gratification of the senses, and will is concerned with these objects. The sum total of the three depends on these. Entire abstraction from all objects of pleasure is called emancipation. Virtue is desirable for the protection of the body, and wealth for acquiring virtue. Pleasure is, after all, only for gratifying the senses. All three, however, have one quality in common: passion. The pursuit of these three for the sake of themselves, with a desire to enjoy their fruits, makes the rewards remote. However, if the pursuit is spurred by a desire for knowledge, the knowledge of self, when they become the means for an end which is noble, the realization of self, then the reward is immense. Virtue is to be acquired for the purification of the soul. Wealth should be acquired so that it may be spent without any desire for the fruits. Pleasure is to be pursued just for supporting the body, and not for gratifying it. Hence it is said that all three of them have their roots in will. Dharma, artha and kama are not ends in themselves, but are just means to an end, and that end is moksha. These three should be abandoned when one has freed oneself by ascetic penance. Emancipation is the only goal of man. Yudhishthir, intelligence, they say, is superior to everything else, intelligence which helps one to plan the future and provide for it, which can meet with any kind of emergency. Tell me about intelligence, particularly when a king has a difficult task to perform, as for instance when he is assailed by many foes. How will intelligence help him to protect himself? Bheeshm, I will tell you about the duties of a king when in distress. A foe then becomes a friend, and a friend will most probably turn out to be a foe. Circumstances will so conspire that the course of human actions becomes uncertain. This is where intelligence comes to one's rescue. It helps you to decide whether one should make war on the foe or make peace with him. It all depends on the time and place, and at times, it is even necessary to make friends with the enemy. You should make friends with intelligent men who are desirous of your welfare. If your life cannot otherwise be saved, then you should certainly make peace with the enemy. If you are foolish enough not to consider this, then you will never succeed in achieving things for which everyone strives so hard. A king, who makes a truce with the enemy, and quarrels with his erstwhile friends after considering the situation to the utmost, its pros and its cons, will certainly be able to succeed. Friends should be examined to the utmost before accepting them as friends. Foes should be well studied and their strength and weakness known. Friends appear as foes, and foes assume the guise of friends. When friendly compacts are undertaken, it is not possible to be sure if the feelings of the other are really friendly, or if it is just selfishness which prompts him to accept the pact. The words friend and foe are, after all, relative terms. A man considers another to be his friend so long as he is assured that his interests are safe, so long as he is sure that it is profitable for him to do so. If he is sure that this state of things will continue as long as the other man is alive, he allows the friendship to continue for life. Self-interest is the most powerful factor in the life of everyone. The entire world is pivoted round only this one factor, and it ever revolves around it. No one is dear to another unless there is some gain involved. No affection is evident unless there is a motive of self-interest. One man is popular because he is very liberal-minded, another because he speaks sweetly, and a third because he is very religious. Generally it is the rule rather than the exception that a man is dear because of the purpose he serves, nothing more. The friendship terminates as soon as the reason for the friendship dies. An intelligent man should know when to make peace with a foe. Remember, when two persons who were once enemies become friends, it is obvious that each is only biding his time when he can get the better of the other. The wiser of the two will necessarily succeed. The policy is that, while you are afraid of the other man, you should appear as though you are not. You should appear as though you trust him implicitly, and all the time, you should be mistrusting him. When the time demands it, you should make peace with your foe, and at the earliest opportunity you must wage war. This rule should apply even for a friend. Yudhishthir, tell me, what is the source of sin? Where does it proceed from, and what is the foundation on which it is built? Bheeshm, covetousness is the one root of all sin. It destroys all merit and all goodness. From it proceeds the river of sin. It is from this single source that many of the sins flow. Covetousness is the eternal spring of cunningness and hypocrisy. Wrath is born of covetousness, lust is born of covetousness, and several of the terrible maladies of the mind spring from covetousness: loss of judgment, deception, pride, arrogance, malice, vindictiveness, shamelessness, loss of virtue, anxiety, and infamy. These are some of the many children of covetousness. Let me recount to you the names of some more of them. Miserliness, cupidity, desire for every kind of improper behavior, pride of birth, pride of learning, pride of beauty, pride of wealth, pitilessness, malevolence, insincerity, appropriation of another's wealth, harshness of speech, talking ill of others, gluttony, a love of falsehood, and a love of every kind of evil act. In life no man has ever been able to give up covetousness. Life may decay, but this will never wane in its power. Even men of great learning, whose minds are the very treasury of all the scriptures, who have the intelligence to clear all the many doubts of others, are found to be incompetent to manage their own affairs. They are spineless and weak, and it is because they are slaves of this dread disease, covetousness. Yudhishthir, tell me about ignorance. Bheeshm, ignorance, my child, again has its origin in this covetousness. As covetousness grows, ignorance grows with it. The root of covetousness is but loss of clear thinking, loss of judgment, and so ignorance is an inseparable companion of covetousness. Yudhishthir, what are the duties which should be preferred to all others? Bheeshm, the highest duty is self-restraint. Just as the great sin covetousness leads to all sins, self-restraint leads a man to the highest glory. It has a number of good qualities born of it: forgiveness, patience, abstaining from injuring others, impartiality, truth, sincerity, modesty, steadiness, liberality, freedom from wrath, contentment, sweetness of speech, benevolence, freedom from malice. A man who is self-restrained will never be a slave to the attachments of the earth. He attains emancipation. He is almost on the threshold of it when he becomes self-restrained. Yudhishthir, I desire to hear about truth. Bheeshm, truth is the duty of every human being. It is an eternal duty. Truth is the highest refuge. Truth is the greatest penance. Truth is the highest yoga, and truth is the eternal Brahman. It is the sacrifice which is greater than all other sacrifices. All the three worlds rest on truth and nothing else. Truth is of 13 kinds: impartiality, self-control, forgiveness, modesty, endurance, goodness, renunciation, contemplation, dignity, fortitude, compassion, and abstinence from injury. All these are aspects of truth. Truth is immutable, eternal, unchangeable. Yudhishthir, what is that good thing which one should strive for? Bheeshm, this world is ever threatened by death. The nights which come and go do but lessen the span of one's life. Death waits for no man. It is nearing every creature every moment. Its progress is imperceptible, but it is ever steady. With the passing of each day, man's life is shortened. Death comes before man's desires have been fulfilled. When he is busy plucking the flowers, death snatches a man away like a beast of prey carrying away a ram. What you have planned to do tomorrow must be done today. What you have planned to do in the afternoon must be done in the forenoon. Death is ruthless. It will never wait and see if all your acts have been carried out. Man should hurry and practice virtue in the prime of life. Life is so uncertain and only death is certain. It may come now or it may come years later. The readiness is important. Virtue will grant you fame in this world and happiness in the next. Man is plagued with 1,000 desires in this world. He becomes attached to many things and many people. His work, his lands, his children, his home, all these have woven a web of attachment from which he is torn away by death. Nothing can resist the force of this web of attachment except truth. Knowledge of the true values of things makes a man realize the transitoriness of the things of the world, and to such a man death has no terrors. Truth is immortality. In the same body can be found the germs of death as well as immortality. It is all in your hands whether you nurture the one or the other. Earthly bondages are so easily formed. It is easy for anyone to nurture the plant of attachment, which is but another name for death. The wise man, however, restrains his senses. He rises above the grasping hands of desire and wrath. He will know how to treat pleasure and pain alike. Tranquility becomes his for the asking, and he attains immortality. His words, his thoughts, his renunciation and his yoga rest on the eternal, the Brahman, and he escapes death. The eye of knowledge is the keenest eye. Truth is the greatest penance. Attachment is the most terrible of all sorrows. Renunciation is the source of the greatest happiness. We are born from Brahman through Brahman. Devoting oneself to Brahman, one can return to Brahman. Seek the self which is concealed in a cave. Yudhishthir, describe to me the man who is dear to all. Who is said to be perfectly accomplished, to be endowed with all the merits that the world speaks about. Bheeshm, such a man as you describe will be learned. He will be good and pious. His blood will never get heated by pride. Discontent and wrath will not be found in him. His senses will never lead him astray, and he will always have peace born of the realization of the supreme truth. Yudhishthir, what makes a man a sinner and what makes him virtuous? What helps him to achieve renunciation? How does he attain emancipation? Bheeshm, desire is responsible for making a man a sinner. When it sees an object of the sense, desire seeks it. For the sake of getting what he wants, man begins to strive for it. The objects of the senses appear so agreeable that man tries his best to get them. Attachment follows in the wake of desire. Immediately follow aversion. Greed and error of judgment. The mind becomes confused, clouded, and man does not any more follow the path of virtue. Assuming a virtue which he does not possess is now the policy of man, and he becomes a hypocrite. Acquiring wealth with the help of hypocrisy is easy for a man who has begun the downward path to sin. In spite of the advice of well-wishers and elders, man begins to act in a sinful manner. There is no more hope of salvation for a confirmed sinner like the man just described. The man who is righteous seeks the good of others, and so he wins good for himself. He is wise and knows how to avoid the pitfalls called the senses. He is wise as to the real nature of happiness and sorrow. Man attains mastery over the senses, and that is called virtue. But still he is discontented. He will not rest until he has mastered the art of renunciation. Knowledge helps him to be free of desire. Finally, realizing that the world is but a passing pageant, that it will be destroyed any time, he tries to cast off virtue with its rewards in the form of heaven and happiness, and tries to attain emancipation. Yudhishthir, what are the attributes that are necessary to a man if he wants to be free from attachment and attain emancipation? Bheeshm, the man fit for emancipation has passed far beyond the ken of the world of the senses. Hunger and thirst do not bother him, nor is he affected by other states of the physical body. His mind is untrammeled by wrath, cupidity, and error. Folly never makes him forget himself. To such a man, a hovel built of bamboo and reeds is the same as the palace of a king. Pleasure and pain do not touch him since he is fully conscious of their birth in delusion. To him, the world is just the consequence of the 5 primal elements combining all together. This truth is always present in his mind when he looks on the world. Pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat, are equal in his eyes. Fear is not in him, nor is there place for anxiety in his heart. He knows fully well that king after king possessed of great power and greater glory abode in this world for a while and then have departed. All things of this earth are transitory, that is the first truth he has realized. Experience of the world and true knowledge have waked in him the truth about the world, and he views everything as unsubstantial. Equipped as he is with so much wisdom, a man attains emancipation wherever he is, whether in domestic life or in the forest. Yudhishthir, your statement intrigues me. Without abandoning domesticity, without adopting life in the forest, how can man attain emancipation? Bheeshm, a king need not give up his kingdom at all for attaining emancipation. You should be free of all attachment. If you are unmoved by companionship of any kind, if you can fix your thoughts on the eternal Brahman, you can be emancipated. Renunciation is the keynote for this path. It is the highest means. Renunciation follows where knowledge guides the mind. Knowledge leads the mind towards yoga, and through yoga man attains to the Brahmic state. A man leading domestic life can certainly attain emancipation, if he can claim to have acquired yama and niyama equal to a sannyasin. Yudhishthir, where does the goddess of prosperity reside? Bheeshm, an eloquent person, an active person, an attentive person, is ever the home of prosperity. Free of wrath, he should have his passions under control, and he should be high-minded. A man of little energy is spurned by her. So also one who is diffident and who is wrathful. Brahmins who are devoted to the study of the Vedas, Kshatriyas who are devoted to righteousness, Vaishyas who are devoted to cultivation, and Sudras who have devotion in their hearts, all these are the dwelling places of the goddess of prosperity. Yudhishthir, what are the duties of a man who has hopes of passing through this world pleasantly and who has hopes of reaching the next world? Bheeshm, the 3 acts of the body, destruction of the lives of other creatures, theft of what belongs to others, and the enjoyment of the wife of another man, should be avoided by a man who aspires for all that you say. He should avoid the 4 acts that are possible with speech, evil conversation, harsh words, publishing other people's fallacies and falsehood. One should avoid the 3 acts of the mind, coveting the possessions of others, injuring others, and disbelief in the ordinances of the Vedas. If these 10 acts are avoided, man will be assured of a pleasant passage through this world and a place in the next world. Yudhishthir, is there anything which is superior to the practice of brahmacharya? I want also to know the highest indication of virtue and the highest kind of purity. Bheeshm, abstaining from wine and meat is even superior to brahmacharya. The best indication of virtue is righteousness, and it is also the highest kind of purity. Yudhishthir, when should one practice dharma? When should one acquire artha? When should kama be indulged in? Bheeshm, the first part of one's life is the time when wealth should be earned. Righteousness should then be practiced, and the enjoyment of pleasure comes later. All this with the special observance that one should not attach oneself to any of these. The end and aim of man should be moksha. Yudhishthir, which is the tirtha of the greatest purity? Bheeshm, there is no doubt that all tirthas are capable of purifying man. But the best of all tirthas which is capable of purifying man is truth. One should bathe in the tirtha called the mind, which cannot be fathomed, which has no stain, and which is pure. This tirtha has truth for its waters, and the lake of the mind is made up of understanding. Once a man bathes in this manasa sarovara, he becomes heir to sincerity, gentleness, truthfulness, compassion, self-restraint, and tranquility. Yudhishthir, who is the true friend of man? Is it his father or mother or son or preceptor or kinsman or friend? When one dies, his body has to be abandoned like a piece of wood or like a clod of earth. Who is the friend who follows him to the next world? Bheeshm, man is born alone and he dies alone. Alone he comes into this beautiful world, and alone he must go when he leaves this world. He has not a single companion in his march through this incident called life. All those you spoke about, the father, the mother, sons, kinsmen, friends, or the preceptor, turn away from you once you are dead. Leaving the dead form of you like a piece of wood or a clod of earth after mourning for a few moments, they turn away from you and go on with their work. They have no more interest in your body, which is all that is left of you. Only dharma, righteousness, follows the body that has been abandoned by all. That is the only friend of man, and that is the one thing that should be sought by man. Yudhishthir, who is the one God in the world? The one object which is our sole refuge. By worshipping whom does one obtain all that one desires? Which is the one religion which is the foremost of all religions? What is the mantra, reciting which, man becomes freed from the bondage of birth? Bheeshm, Krishn is the Lord of the universe. He is the God of gods. He is the foremost of all beings. By him is pervaded this universe. Meditating on him, and on his many names, man can transcend all sorrow. The foremost of all religions is Krishn. He is the highest energy. He is the highest penance. He is the highest refuge. He is the holiest of holies. He is the beginning of all creation, and the end of all creation. Krishn is the eternal Brahman. Surrender yourself to him, and you will be one with him, with Krishna, the Lord of the past, the present and the future, the Supreme Soul. The days of instruction were over. Bheeshm said, "My child, I have taught you all that you wanted to learn. Go back to your kingdom and begin your rule. The people will be as happy as they were when the great kings Nahush, Harishchandra, and Yayati ruled this world. You carry my blessings with you. Go, my child, and come to me when Uttarayana comes on. I have been waiting for that. I will see you once again then." Yudhishthir took tender leave of him, and they all went back to Hastinapur. 12. The passing of Bheeshm. When the holy day came, the day which was to grant Bheeshm freedom from this human bondage, all the Pandavas led by Dhritarashtra and Krishn went to the field carrying auspicious things with them, flowers and incense and gems and fruits and costly silks. Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Kunti, the 5 brothers with Draupadi, Krishn with Satyaki, Vidur and Yuyutsu went to the field where Bheeshm was waiting for his release. They walked to his presence. Bheeshm was surrounded by all the rishis. Vyas, Parasara, Narad and all the rishis from the heavens were by the side of Bheeshm. Yudhishthir saluted his grandfather and said, "My lord, I am Yudhishthir the Pandav. I am here with my brothers and all those who are near and dear to you. The entire city of Hastinapur has come to pay its respect to your honored self. Your son Dhritarashtra is here. My lord, Krishn is here. Be pleased to open your eyes and look on all of us." Bheeshm opened his tired eyes and looked at the ocean of people who had assembled to pay their respect to him. He said, "I am happy to see you with all these people, my child. At last, at long last, the sun has turned his chariot towards the north. It seems to me as though 100 years have passed by since I lay me down on this bed of arrows. The month of Magha has come. It is time for me to leave this earth." Bheeshm turned to Dhritarashtra and said, "My son, you know all the duties of a king. There is nothing that you do not know. Wise as you are, you should not grieve for the death of your sons. It was fate. Yudhishthir and his brothers are your sons. They are devoted to you. Be happy with them." Bheeshm turned his eyes on Krishn. He called for flowers and worshipped Krishn with them. He said, "You are the Lord of the universe. You are the Purusha, and you are the creator of the world. You are the supreme eternal soul. Reveal to me your Visvarup and grant me permission to depart from this world. Grant me leave to cast off this human body. Permitted by you I will reach the highest end." Bheeshm saw the infinite splendor of the Lord's Visvarup. Krishn said, "Devrath, I do grant you leave to reach your home. You can go back to the Vasus. You will never be born again in this world of mortal men. You are like Markandeya. Death is waiting at your doorsteps, waiting like a servant for your summons. You can summon death." Bheeshm's face was lit up by an unearthly smile. He closed his eyes and lay still for a few moments. He made a gentle effort and willed himself to die. Those around him saw a wonderful glow leave his body. It rose up in the sky and became lost in the clouds. There was heard heavenly instruments making sweet music. The sky was filled with it. A cool breeze blew, laden with the perfume of 1,000 heavenly flowers. The earth was cool and pleasant. The heart of everyone was filled with a strange peace when the soul of Bheeshm went on its journey to the heavens. They placed his body with all the arrows on a pyre made of sandalwood. Yudhishthir and Vidur wrapped the body of the great man in silk and flowers. Yudhishthir held the royal white umbrella over it. The funeral procession was solemn and splendid. The Sama was chanted by the Brahmins and Dhritarashtra set fire to the pyre. Yudhishthir and his brothers with Vidur and Dhritarashtra stood on the right side of the pyre. The next day they collected the bones of Bheeshm and went to the river Ganga. They offered the oblations to Ganga who bore Bheeshm. The river stopped flowing. Ganga rose up from the river and came ashore, weeping and lamenting her child. She looked at all the many who had assembled there and said, "My child is dead. He was a devoted son, and he was loved by all. He was invincible. Even the great Bhagwan Bhargav had to admit defeat at the hands of my child. And such a hero has been killed by Shikhandi. Surely, my heart is made of stone, or else it should have been broken long ago. The man who was without an equal in this entire world has been killed. I have lost my child. I had hopes of his ruling this world, and I see him dead. My child, my poor unfortunate child, is dead, and I am left lamenting." Her grief was terrible. Krishn went near her and said, "Weep not, mother of the world. Your son has gone to the world to which he belongs. You know that he was one of the Vasus and had to spend these years on the world because of a curse. He is not made like the other men. He is not meant to govern the kingdom like ordinary kings. Do not grieve for him. Do not let your human affections cloud your wisdom. Your son was a god and he is again one with the gods. There is nothing here for you to grieve. Rejoice that he has at last been released from the curse to live on the world of mortal men." Ganga disappeared from their sight, and the river resumed its flow. It flowed placidly on as it had been flowing since the beginning of time. With sorrow and gladness blended in a strange manner, they all returned to the city Hastinapur. 13. Krishn returns to Dwahrika. Try as he might, Yudhishthir was not able to forget the past. It was burning him day and night. When Dhritarashtra sent word to him through Sanjay, before the war, he had said that Yudhishthir, with his gentle nature, would repent for destroying his cousins for the rest of his life. He spoke the truth. The state of the king was causing them worry. Dhritarashtra, forgetting his own pain, tried to pacify Yudhishthir. Krishn too joined in the entreaties of the old king. Finally it was possible to bring him back to a normal frame of mind. Yudhishthir took up the task of ruling the kingdom with great sincerity, and he was acclaimed the ideal ruler. Everyone was happy under his rule. He won the heart of everyone with his sweet and compassionate nature. Arjun and Krishn spent their time in going back to the places where they used to walk together in the old days. They went to their beloved Indraprasth and spent several days there. It was pleasant to roam about the gardens and halls of the great Sava. They talked of all the many things which had happened since they last walked there. It looked as though not many days had passed since they were there last. Actually, it was 15 years back that these two friends were there together. 15 years back the forest by name Kandav was burnt by Agni. Maya was saved from the fire, and he had offered to do them a favor. Krishn had suggested the building of the Maya Sava. Then came Narad and his talk about the Rajsuya. Looking back in retrospect, they tried to pick out the important incidents, the several scenes which made up this tragic drama. Draupadi's appearance on the stage was actually the first act. The meeting between Krishn and the Pandavas was the second act. Narad's coming was the third act. The mind of Yudhishthir was upset by the fact that his father was not in the Sava of Indra because he had not performed the Rajsuya. That was the beginning of all this pain. The killing of Shishupal was the next act. It was the fourth act in the tragic drama. The other acts followed in quick succession. The game of dice with Shakuni in the leading role was the fifth act, and the court scene was the sequel to it. It was the beginning of the end. The court scene where Draupadi was dragged to the court was the climax. The drama had reached the pinnacle of intensity when they all took their oaths. The rest was the catastrophe. The later acts were laden with retribution. The scene in Dwahrika when Duryodhana and Arjun went to ask for the help of Krishn was the sixth act. It decided the fates of all of them, the moment when Arjun chose Krishn as his charioteer. The war itself was the final act, the seventh. The 18 days of war, the death of the great Bheeshm, Drona, Radhaya and Abhimanyu were just scenes in that mighty seventh act. With the death of Shakuni the drama was over. The tragic drama was ended. The death of Duryodhana was the final denouement. The drama covered a period of several years. They had reached the stage when they could look back on it. They had traveled some distance of time, and they could look back and review the years without emotion. Memory did wince when she took up some moments in her hands. But they were now secure from the gnawing pain that was in their hearts a few months back. Krishn said, "Arjun, the war is over. Your enemies have all been killed. Yudhishthir is the monarch of the Kuru kingdom. I bad taken upon my shoulders this burden. My task is over. My thoughts are turned towards Dwahrika now. I desire to see my parents. I dare not ask your brother for permission to go. You must first permit me to go, Arjun. Then you can tell Yudhishthir about my wish to go home. If he is willing to let me go, I will leave for Dwahrika. If, however, he wishes me to stay on, I will. Yudhishthir's wishes mean more to me than my own. You are all able to help your brother to rule the kingdom. He has Vidur to counsel him. My purpose is served. I think it is time I go back home. Arjun, please grant me permission to go." Arjun shed tears of sorrow at the words of Krishn. So their great partnership was at an end. The inseparables, Parth and his Sarthi, were to be parted. His heart was aching for the days of the long ago to come back. Even if it meant reliving the war, he did not mind it. He wanted to recapture the thrill of those days when they would set out to the battle, field blowing their conchs lustily. The 18 days of war were the most thrilling days in his lifetime. He and Krishn would not be parted even for a moment. They were always together. And now he heard Krishn saying, "My purpose is served." Arjun remembered the day when his chariot was burnt. Krishn had said that everything in the world was created for a purpose. Once that purpose was served, the world had no more need of it. But it was not so with Krishn. He was needed. Arjun would be lost without him. He could not say that his work was done, that his purpose was over, the purpose for which he had been born. Arjun wept tears of anguish and said, "My lord, your purpose served. Please do not say that once more. I cannot bear it." Krishn laughed at him and said, "I did not mean to hurt you, Arjun. I just meant the war when I said that. I know that you need me. More than that, I need you. I cannot live without you. Have you still not realized that you and I are part of each other? Half my soul is Arjun." Krishn told him about the night before the death of Jayadratha. He told him about his conversation with Derek and his deciding to fight if it came to the worst. Arjun was touched by the words of Krishn. They sat in silence for a while. They were so fond of each other. It was not necessary to talk about it. They wandered each into the mind of the other. After a long time, Arjun agreed to allow Krishn to go back to Dwahrika on condition that he would come back very soon. Krishn smiled and said, "Of course. I cannot stay away from you for long. I will come back soon." They returned to Hastinapur. These few days at Indraprastha were very happy days. Arjun was happy they had gone to their old haunts. They went to the presence of Dhritarashtra and Yudhishthir. The night was spent happily. In the morning Arjun and Krishn went to the chambers of Yudhishthir. They spent some time together. Arjun gently spoke about Krishn's desire to return to his Dwahrika. The very mention of it brought tears to the eyes of Yudhishthir. He composed himself and said, "Krishn, it is but right that you should wish to see your parents. I do not want to prevent you from going. But Krishn, how can we live without you? You are part of me and I cannot think of letting you go. But I must allow it. I will send you on one condition. As in the days of old when we were at Indraprastha, you must come to me whenever I think of you. When I wanted you, you have always known it and come to me. It must be so even now. Go, my child, go and see your father and your dear mother. They have not seen you for a long time. So much has happened since they saw you last." He embraced Krishn and gave him permission to go back to Dwahrika. Krishn's chariot driven by Dwahrika was at the doorway of the palace. The leave-taking was very tender. Satyaki was sobbing with emotion when he took leave of the Pandavas. They had gone through so much together. Bheem was standing there stupefied. He would be so lonely after the departure of Krishn and Satyaki, his friend. Krishn took leave of all of them. He prostrated before Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Kunti, Vidur, Yudhishthir and Bheem. They blessed him. Draupadi bade him farewell. The chariot was waiting. With great unwillingness Krishn ascended the chariot followed by Satyaki. They all stood there watching the chariot until it disappeared from their sight. Wiping their eyes, they went into the palace. 14. Parikshit, the Aswamedh Yaga. Vyas was a frequent visitor to the court of Yudhishthir. He came again and was honored. He knew that the king had still not got over his grief. He said, "It will be a very great achievement if you perform the yaga called the Aswamedh. It will make you happy, and it is the proper thing for a monarch to do." He told the Pandavas that it was not an easy thing since it needed immense wealth, and they could get it from the Himalayan mountains. The Maruts had buried their treasure under the slopes of the great mountain. Yudhishthir was very pleased with the suggestion of the wise Vyas. He found that his brothers too welcomed the suggestion with enthusiasm. Bheem was particularly happy since he found his brother enthusiastic about something. He was tired of seeing the incessant mourning of Yudhishthir. As for Arjun, he was thrilled at the thought of fighting once again. He offered to go round the world leading the sacrificial horse. He would conquer all the kings who would dare to oppose him. The Pandavas sent word to Krishn that they were all going towards the Himalayas with the purpose of collecting the untold wealth of the Maruts, that the king was going to perform the Aswamedh according to the suggestion of Vyas. They requested Krishn and Balram, and all the Vrishnis to go to Hastinapur as early as they could. The kingdom was left in the hands of Yuyutsu, and Yudhishthir set out with great happiness. He loved the Himalayas and his heart was light. Vyas was wise in his suggestion. This new plan was keeping the king occupied. He had something to do and he had no time to brood. They went to their beloved Himalayas and spent some time there. They collected the wealth of the Maruts and began their return journey. The entire host of the Vrishnis had reached Hastinapur to attend the Aswamedh of Yudhishthir. They came even before the Pandavas had returned from the north. The main reason for this early arrival was this. Uthara's child was to be born any moment now. Krishn knew that it would not be alive when it came. He had taken an oath that he would give it life in spite of its being burnt by the great Brahmasir Shastra. Krishn had come early to give life to that child, the heir to the throne of the Pauravas. They spent a few happy days there. The great day came. Uthara gave birth to a child which had no life. Knowing this by instinct, Krishn, accompanied by Satyaki, hurried to the chambers where Uthara was lying in bed. He met Kunti coming out of the room weeping and wailing. She saw Krishn and said, "Krishn, you have got to give life to the hope of the Pandavas. Your nephew's child has got to live. You are my only hope." Come with me and see that child which wants to live, but cannot since Ashvatthama has not allowed it to live." Krishna raised up the weeping queen and said, "Do not fear. I have promised that I will make the child of Abhimanyu live. I will do it even if I have to spend all the punya I have acquired all these days." Krishna entered the chambers of Uttara. They were all there, Draupadi and Subhadra, and all the women of the royal household. Uttara saw him and rushed to him and fell at his feet. She fainted away. They lifted her up and placed her on a couch nearby. Krishna saw the tiny little body of the newborn child. It was lifeless. His heart was swelling with affection for this bit of flesh which was all that was left of his beloved Abhimanyu. It had to be revived. Yes, it had to be. Krishna's face was now stern. His smile had vanished. No one could recognize this Krishna. They were looking at him with their eyes open wide with amazement. He looked as though he did not belong to this world. He was far away. Suddenly Krishna took the little child in his hands. It was limp as a lotus hurt by snow. Krishna took it in his lotus hands. He passed his divine hands along the body of the child. His fingers traveled from the head to the little toes of the child. At the touch of his blessed hands the child became alive. It began to cry lustily. It had been granted life. Krishna was limp with exhaustion. Sweat was pouring down his face in tiny rivulets. He came out of the chambers. He could not walk. He looked so tired. He sat on a stone seat for a while. Satyaki was waiting for him. He had heard the cry of the child. He was happy. He saw Krishna come out of the chambers of Uttara, as though he were in a daze. He saw Krishna stagger towards the stone seat. Satyaki saw Krishna to be in a trance. Satyaki waited for him to come. He guessed that Krishna would not be pleased if he intruded into his inmost thoughts. It was evident that this task had drained him of all his energy, his spiritual energy. Krishna was regaining it. It was a sacred moment. Krishna was tuning himself to be in touch with the infinite in order to get his energy back. Satyaki waited. Krishna came to him. He looked the same old Krishna. His face glowed with a new light. He looked as though he had gone through a strange experience. Satyaki did not speak about it. He said, "So Abhimanyu lives again. Glory will be yours for this act of yours, Krishna. It is a greater achievement than winning the war on the Kurukshetra field." Krishna smiled and said, "Yes, Satyaki, this was more difficult than winning the war." They walked away from there with their hands locked together. The palace was a temple of joy. The entire kingdom was celebrating the birth of the heir to the throne of the Pauravas. A month passed. The child of Abhimanyu was given the name Parikshit. The days were spent in celebrating the event. Even Subhadra was able to forget her pain when she saw the son of her Abhimanyu. They heard that Yudhishthir was returning from the north. Krishna and the others went to meet them halfway. The entire party entered the city with great enthusiasm. Vyas came and the preparations were begun for the Aswamedh. The king saw the newborn child of Abhimanyu, and his sorrow was all gone at the sight of the child. It was amusing to see Bheem carrying the small child in his huge, big hands. He was very fond of their grandson. Yudhishthir came to Krishna and said, "Krishna, please listen to my words. I have a request to make. You must perform this yaga. You have won this kingdom for us, and it is but right that you should perform the Aswamedh." Krishna smiled gratefully at Yudhishthir and said, "You are the ruler of the kingdom. You are the Lord and Master for all of us. It is but right that the Aswamedh Yaga should be performed by a king of the lunar race. It is all in the tradition of the kings of this house. Your dear grandfather has said that you will be like Nahush and Harishchandra. I will be greatly honored if I am allowed to serve you as one of your vassals. I am proud of you, my lord. I am a very happy man. I am seeing all my dreams come true, one after another. They all come true, my lord, if only one has the patience for it. Krishn was feeling happy to see that the king had thrown off his sorrow, and was glowing like the sun after it has come out of the eclipse. He could see that Yudhishthir was really happy. Arjun was sent to the four quarters with the sacrificial horse. He went in all the four quarters and the conquests were all easy. He was not opposed in many of the countries. In the places where he was opposed it was not hard for him to defeat the kings and collect dues from them. He invited all the kings to attend the Aswamedh Yaga and returned to Hastinapur with the white sacrificial horse. Bheem and Nakul with Sahdev were in charge of all the arrangements. Then began the preparations for the Yaga. It was just like the great Rajsya which Yudhishthir had performed years back. The Pandavas and Krishn with the heroes of the Vrishni house were there. But all the other kings were the children, or the nephews of the kings who had attended the Rajsya. The Aswamedh Yaga was over. All the kings returned to their kingdoms after they had been honored by Yudhishthir. Krishn and Balram with Satyaki and the other Vrishni heroes returned to Dwahrika. 15. The death of the elders. 15 years had passed. The rule of Yudhishthir was that of an ideal king and an ideal man. His court had Kripa now. Vyas made Yudhishthir appoint him as the tutor to Parikshit. Hastinapur was ruled by the ablest of men, and the people were happy. Dhritarashtra, however, could not be happy. He knew that Yudhishthir was treating him as a king and as a father, that he was the most affectionate person he had ever met. But the heart of the old man was thinking only of his son Duryodhan. He could not forget his favorite child. He was with Yudhishthir for 15 years, and now suddenly he wanted to go away to the forest. He talked it over with Gandhari. They were both of the same thinking. Dhritarashtra wanted to go away from the city where his son ruled once. He summoned Yudhishthir to his presence and told him about his wish. The king Yudhishthir was very unhappy and hurt by the attitude of his uncle. He tried to dissuade him. But the old man was adamant. Yudhishthir persisted in his pleading. But it was of no avail. Vyas came and told Yudhishthir that he should allow the old king to go to the forest. It was the custom for kings to go away to the forest renouncing worldly desires, and it was the proper thing to do. Very unwillingly Yudhishthir allowed Dhritarashtra and Gandhari to go to the forest. A new shock was awaiting him. Kunti told him that she was also set on going with the other two. Yudhishthir did not know what to do or what to say. He was terribly upset by the declaration of his mother. All the sons and Draupadi and Subhadra and little Uttara tried to make her change her mind. But she was firm. She said that she had to do expiation for the sin she committed towards her child Radhaya. She was very firm about it. They had to allow her to go. Vidur and Sanjay also accompanied them. The next morning Dhritarashtra, accompanied by Gandhari, Kunti, Vidur and Sanjay, set out for the forest, mourned by all the citizens of Hastinapur. The Pandavas were not happy at the thought of their going. Very sadly they bade farewell to all of them and returned to their empty palace. Their parting from their mother was too much for them. Dhritarashtra was first headed towards the banks of the Ganga, and from there he went to the ashrama of Vyas. There they stayed, trying to assuage the grief in their hearts by listening to the words of the rishis there. Yudhishthir could not bear the parting from his mother. Sahdev was feeling it too. One day, they suddenly decided to go to the forest and visit their mother and Dhritarashtra with Gandhari. It was a very pleasant journey. Soon they reached the ashrama where they were all staying. They were returning from the banks of the river when the Pandavas went there. Sahdev rushed up to Kunti and fell at her feet. She was very happy to see her favorite child. All of them were seated inside the ashrama. They were not able to speak for a while. Later they spoke of all that had happened during the absence of the elders from the city. Suddenly Yudhishthir looked around and said, "Where is uncle? Where is Vidur?" They told him that Vidur was mortifying himself and was living on just air. They said that he was in the heart of the forest and would come only very rarely. Someone saw him from a distance just then. They showed him to Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir went towards the spot where Vidur was. He was not the old Vidur. His body was a bundle of bones, and he was almost dying. But his eyes were glowing with a strange intensity. Yudhishthir went to him and spoke to him. I am Yudhishthir, my lord. Speak to me. It was obvious that Vidur could not speak. He stood leaning against a tree. Yudhishthir found himself compelled to look straight into the eyes of Vidur. Vidur's eyes burned into those of Yudhishthir. The four eyes were locked in this gaze for a while. Yudhishthir was not able to withdraw his eyes. A strange thing happened. Yudhishthir felt himself to be growing stronger and wiser. He found himself to be different. He felt that he was more like Vidur than Yudhishthir. He looked at Vidur and found that he was dead. He realized that Vidur had entered his body and had abandoned his. He wanted the body of Vidur to be cremated. He heard the voice of Dharm from the heavens. Dharm said, Vidur was the incarnation of Dharm even as you are. When he died he entered your body. You have Vidur in you now. As for his body, do not do anything to it. You must not cremate it since it is part of you. Leave it as it is and go and join your brothers. Yudhishthir went back to the presence of Dhritarashtra, and he told them all about his strange experience. They spent a few days with the old people, and then they were asked to return to Hastinapur. The parting from their mother was very difficult for them. Kunti embraced all of them and told her eldest son, My son, we may not meet again. Take care of my child Sahdev. I have always loved him most. Though he is old enough, I feel that he is a child. Take care of yourself and all the others. Rule the kingdom well. I bless you all. They parted in tears, and the procession wended its way to Hastinapur once more. 2 years later, Narad came to Hastinapur. He was received with great honor. It was known to Yudhishthir that the visit of Narad meant that he had something important to tell them. All the brothers were there and Narad said, Yudhishthir, you are right in your guess. I have news of grave import to you. Your uncle Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, and Kunti were returning to their hermitage from the river. Sanjay was with them. They were weak and ill with the severe penance they had been performing. It so happened that a fire had begun to burn the forest where they were staying. They saw the fire and made no attempt to escape from it. The king made Sanjay leave them before the fire made it impossible for him to escape. He tried to protest, but the king insisted, and so Sanjay went away from there to the Himalaya to spend the rest of his lifetime there. These three allowed themselves to be burnt by the forest fire. I am sorry to be the messenger of this bad news. Yudhishthir fainted away. Sahdev wept like a child. Bheem was inconsolable. Their mother was dead. They could not grasp it at all. But they had to. It was not easy for the sons of Kunti to think of themselves as orphans. Their dear mother was dead. Kunti, who was the one person who went through numberless sufferings for their sake, was now dead. Narad tried to comfort them. Vyas came and he too tried to make them face the sorrow with fortitude. It was not possible. It took them months and years to forget the sorrow caused by the death of their dear mother. But time is a great healer. The Pandavas were once more able to concentrate on other things. They were able to devote themselves to the ruling of the kingdom. Parikshit was their source of comfort. The beautiful son of Abhimanyu was able to dispel their pain and sorrow. 16. The tragedy at Prabhaasa. Several years passed. It was the 36th year of the rule of Yudhishthir. 36 years had gone by after the Great War. Yudhishthir saw in the heavens the same evil omens that were seen to occur just before the Great War. These portents spoke of some great calamity that was waiting to befall them. Yudhishthir did not know what was to happen. He felt that some great destruction was imminent. He could not guess what it was to be. He could only guess that something terrible was to happen very soon. Krishn saw these omens too. He sensed the destruction of the Vrishni house. The curse of Gandhari had to be fulfilled. This curse was preceded by another curse. Once, when the rishis Visvamitra, Kanva, and Narad had come to Dwahrika, the young men of the family of Vasudeva tried to play a practical joke on the holy men who had come. They dressed Samba as a woman and took him to the rishis. The youngsters asked the rishis, "This woman is expecting a child. You are said to have foresight. Can you look into the future and tell us whether she will get a son or a daughter?" The rishis, strangely lacking in that virtue called sense of humor, were very angry because of the joke. They said, "This woman, as you call him, will give birth to an iron rod. That rod will be the cause of the destruction of the entire house of the Vrishnis." The young men were horrified at what they had done. They tried their best to pacify the rishis, but they could not. It was a dreadful future that had been predicted. Samba did give birth to an iron rod. The boys went to Krishn and Balram and told them the whole story. Balram was very upset. He ordered the rod to be crushed to powder. The powder was thrown into the sea. They thought that they had managed to outwit fate. Everyone had forgotten the incident, everyone except Krishn. 36 years after the Great War, Krishn saw the dreadful portents written in the skies. He knew that it meant the destruction of the entire family. Krishn was unmoved. He was tired of life. He wanted to leave the world. This was the last thing he had to see before he left the world where he had been born to cleanse it of its sins. The fourth quarter of time, Kali had already set foot. Krishn could see that men were beginning to lose their sense of dharma. He would have to be born again when Kali was about to end. But before that he had a chance to go back to where he came from. He had to stay so that the curse of Gandhari could be fulfilled. He looked on his own people. They had lost their righteousness. They were heading for the final quarrel, which was to destroy them all. One day, as was their usual custom, the entire family set out to the place called Prabhaasa for the worship of Shankar. It was a very happy group of people. Krishn remembered the time they went to Prabhaasa several years back. It was when Arjun was in the garden of Subhadra. Krishn had arranged for their elopement, and he had brought away his brother and the others to Prabhaasa, so that it might be easy for the young lovers to run away unheeded. What a distance of time had been covered since then. This was to be their final trip to Prabhaasa. They would never go there any more. Krishn was now impatient for the end to come. He had become disgusted and disillusioned. He wanted to get away from it all. The caravan of chariots and other vehicles proceeded towards the pleasure spot Prabhaasa. They reached Prabhaasa. Tents were pitched and all were installed in their individual tents for the night. The next day was spent in games of all kinds. There was great feasting, and it went on for a number of days. One day, after this feasting and drinking, they were all talking about old events. Kritvarma was there. Satyaki was drunk, and so were the others. Suddenly Satyaki took it into his head to insult Kritvarma. Ever since he joined the side of Duryodhan in the Great War, Satyaki bore him a grudge. He had never forgiven him for that. He decided to taunt him. It was the drink which made him do it. It was also, of course, fate. Satyaki brought the conversation round to the war and said, "I am yet to see a Kshatriya who can kill people who are sleeping, who can set fire to the camp of the enemy like a common thief, and run away to his country, afraid to face the consequences of his act." These words made Kritvarma wild with fury. He was also drunk. He brought up the subject of the killing of Purisravas, and people began to take sides and fight. It was a drunken brawl. The great house of the Vrishnis had descended to this. Krishn was watching all the while. He saw his son Pradyumna take the side of Satyaki. Satyaki sprang at Kritvarma and said, "Today I will avenge the death of the best man that fought in the great war, Drishtadhum." Satyaki cut off the head of Kritvarma. The brawl became a fight. Those who had no weapons took up the weeds that were growing along the seashore and fought with each other. The weeds had all sprung up from the powdered rod of iron which was destined to be the destruction of the house of the Vrishnis. Krishn saw Satyaki killed, and he saw his son Pradyumna killed. He knew that he had nothing more to live for. There was nothing more left. Krishn took up handfuls of the weed himself and threw it all at those who were fighting. Each weed became a terrible weapon. The weeds were scattered everywhere. The whole crowd was destroyed in a matter of a few moments. It was destroyed by Krishn. His face had assumed a dreadful aspect. He was death. All were dead except Balram, Krishn and Derek. Balram was not to be found there. Derek and Krishn went in search of him. They found him near the shore of the sea, leaning against a tree. Disgusted with the drunken brawl, Balram had already left the place and reached the seashore. He had decided to give up his life. He was sitting in the yoga trance. Krishn saw him and said, "Derek, go at once to Hastinapur. Tell my dear Arjun about the happenings at Prabhaasa. Tell Yudhishthir everything. Tell him about the moral degradation of the Vrishni house. Tell them that the heroes had become so deteriorated that a drunken brawl was enough to destroy them. Tell him about the curse of the rishis and of Gandhari. Bring Arjun as early as you can to Dwahrika, and ask him to take care of the women and children. Ask him to come soon." It was with a heavy heart that Derek bade farewell to Krishn and set out towards Hastinapur. Krishn hurried to his brother and said, "Brother, wait for me. I will go back to Dwahrika and leave the women and children with our father. I will come back and we can go together." Krishn went back to Dwahrika. He went to his father Vasudev and said, "I have sent for Arjun. He will come and take charge of everything. He will come soon. I have to go back. Balram is waiting for me. I have to go to him. I cannot look on this Dwahrika without my people. Balram and I are bent on tapas." Krishn fell at the feet of his father. He would not look back. He walked away as fast as he could. He reached the spot where his dear brother was waiting for him. Balram saw him and went into a trance. Krishn stood by and waited and watched. He saw an immense white serpent coming out of the mouth of Balram. It came out and disappeared into the ocean. It is said that Krishn is the incarnation of Vishnu, and that Balram is the incarnation of Sesha, the serpent which is the bed of Vishnu. Krishn saw Sesha issuing out of the mouth of Balram. He knew that his time had come too. 17. The death of Krishn. It was evening. Krishn wandered about, lost in thought. He had reached the end of his life. He had achieved all that he came to achieve. His mind went back to the days at Gokula. He thought of Yasoda, his foster mother. His thoughts hovered about Radha as a bee would round a flower laden with honey. Krishn brushed the memory away. His mind now went to Mathura, where he had killed the tyrant Kansas. The years rolled on like the waves of the sea, which he was seeing with unseeing eyes. His thoughts rested on the Pandavas. He thought of his first meeting with the Pandavas. Then came the many incidents in their pain-filled lives. Then the war. The destruction of the Kshatriyas of the world. Then came the death of Duryodhan and the curse of Gandhari. Krishn had to live to see it fulfilled. He thought of the dead child of Abhimanyu and his giving life to it. He smiled. Yes, it was a great effort to do it. But he had done it. To the last, he had guarded the Pandavas. He had only one regret. He could not meet Arjun. Suddenly his face was lit up by a sweet smile. He could melt into his dream and speak to him. Krishn sat down in a trance. With great effort of the will he touched the mind of Arjun with his own. He felt that Arjun's mind had been drawn by the power of his mind. He was glad about it. Arjun was sitting alone in his apartments. He was suddenly reminded of Krishn. He felt that Krishna spoke to him and said, "Arjun, lie down, Arjun. I want to talk to you." Arjun did as he was bid. At once he fell into a deep sleep. Krishna melted into his dream, as he had done years ago on the night of Abhimanyu's death. Krishna took his hands in his and said, "Arjun, do you remember my telling you once that everything in this world is born to serve a purpose? The next moment after having done so, it will have to die." Arjun said, "Yes, Krishna. You said it when my chariot was burnt after the war. You also said." Krishna intervened and said, "Yes, I said that it is even so with men. Each man is set on this strange eventful journey called life. He has been sent into this world with a purpose. Once that purpose is served, the earth has no more need of him. It is the case with all of us, even me. I have created myself on this earth for a purpose. It is not yet over. Something still remains. The moment it is over, I will die too, and so will you and your brothers." Arjun, do you remember all that? Arjun said, "Yes, my lord, I do remember it." Krishna said, "Arjun, I wanted to tell you that the purpose of my life has been fulfilled. I am going. You must come too. We can never be away from each other." Arjun said, "Krishna, my lord, what is this you are saying? I cannot grasp what you are saying." Krishna laughed gently and said, "My dearest friend, I wanted to see you just once before going away. I have seen you. I have no regrets. As for the meaning of my words, you will understand tomorrow." The dewy smile was illuminating the face of Krishna. He was smiling just that smile when he faded away from the dream of Arjun. Krishna now walked with slow and hesitant steps. He was a god. He could die as his brother did. He could just give up his breath by yoga. But this incarnation of his was that of a man. He had told Arjun once that he would act in accordance with the role he was playing. He had to die like a man and not like a saint. There had to be something to cause his death. Pondering on this, Krishna lay down on the ground and went into a deep sleep. There was a hunter in the neighborhood. He was passing by with a bow and arrow. He looked at the sleeping form of Krishna. From a distance, Krishna looked like some animal sleeping. Actually, the hunter thought that it was a deer, because of the yellow silk which Krishna was wearing. The hunter took careful aim and sent the arrow. It entered the body of Krishna through the sole of his foot. The great Prabhaasa had granted Krishna a boon. He had granted him invulnerability all over the body except the solace of his feet. The arrow of the hunter entered the body of Krishna through the one vulnerable part of his body. Once this hunter was passing along the shore of the sea. His foot tripped against something. He stooped and saw that it was a piece of iron. He took it in his hand and saw that it would make a beautiful arrowhead. He fixed it on his arrow. The piece of iron was a portion of the iron rod which had been powdered and thrown into the sea, and it was this arrow which had entered the foot of Krishna. Krishna suffered intense pain and called out in agony. The hunter hurried to his side. Instead of a deer, he found a man dressed in beautiful yellow silk. He was horrified at what he had done. But Krishna smiled at him and said, "My dear man, you have done me a great favor. You have solved for me my final problem, how to die. Go in peace, my friend. You will reach the heavens for this your act." The hunter tried his best to nurse the dying man. But it was all of no avail. The great Krishna was dead. His soul ascended to the heavens, making the earth glow with its progress. Krishna had left this world. He had served the purpose for which he came, and the earth no longer had any need of him. He went back to where he came from. The world was without Krishna. It was like a body from which life had flown away. The earth was a flower which had lost its perfume. 18. The sea enters Dwahrika. Derek hurried towards Hastinapur. He told them all about the great tragedy at Prabhaasa. He told them everything. Yudhishthir, for the moment, had not remembered the curse of Gandhari. The Pandavas were numb with woe. They had suffered so much. But the thoughts of Krishn were enough to give them strength. But now there was nothing. It was not possible to think. In mute agony, Arjun got into his chariot and rushed to Dwahrika. He thought of the dream he had yesterday. Krishn had said, "You will understand the meaning of my words tomorrow." Arjun knew that Krishn was dead. His heart was frozen with the shock. Soon he reached Dwahrika and went to the presence of Vasudeva. He heard about the details of the tragedy that had overtaken the house of the Vrishnis. Arjun went to Prabhaasa. He saw that they were all dead. His beloved Satyaki was lying there dead. He saw Pradyumna. He saw his friend Gada. He saw all of them. Vasudeva told him about the words of Krishn, that Balram and he were going to perform penance. Arjun went in search of these two. He came across the dead form of Balram. Derek led him to the spot. Arjun had become dead to everything. Derek and he looked for Krishn. Finally they saw him too, with his soul pierced by an arrow. Arjun looked long at Krishn. With the death of Krishn, the earth had lost everything that was beautiful. Arjun wanted to hurry through his task. Krishn had asked him to come soon. Krishn would be waiting for him. He had to hurry. Arjun arranged for the bodies of Balram and Krishn to be taken to Dwahrika. He stood by while that dear body of his Krishn was being consumed by flames. Arjun worked like a man possessed. He was not himself. The dreadful day was over. Arjun spent the night with his mind set on Krishn. He thought of nothing else. In the morning he found that Vasudeva had died by going into a yogic trance and abandoning his body. Dwahrika was empty of everything that was dear to Arjun. Several of the wives of Krishn and Balram had ascended the funeral pyre, and it was now the duty to take the citizens and the other women and children of the family of his friend to Hastinapur and take care of them. He collected all of them, and the long mournful procession began. Dwahrika was empty. The sea, which had been beating against the shores, suddenly broke the boundary that was imposed on it by nature. The sea rushed into the city. It coursed through the streets of the beautiful city. The sea covered up everything in the city. Even as they were all looking, Arjun saw the beautiful buildings becoming submerged one by one. Arjun took a last look at the mansion of Krishn. It was soon covered by the sea. In a matter of a few moments it was all over. The sea had now become as placid as a lake. There was no trace of the beautiful city, which had been the favored haunt of all the Pandavas. Dwahrika was just a name, just a memory. Arjun went on towards Hastinapur. They would camp under the trees during the nights and resume the journey in the morning. It was the most dreadful time in the life of Arjun. He had to keep himself occupied lest he should go mad too soon. One day, during their journey through the woods, some robbers saw this huge crowd. They wanted to attack them. They saw just one man guarding the entire party of women and children. They descended on the people of Dwahrika and tried to carry away all their wealth and their women too. Arjun took up his Gandhi and tried to string it in a hurry. He found that he was not able to do it. He was amazed. With a great effort he finally managed to string it. But his fingers had lost their dexterity. He was feeling it so hard to use the bow and arrows. His quivers became empty. He decided to invoke some astra and dispatch the robbers. But he could not remember a single incantation. He was powerless. Arjun could do nothing. The robbers had succeeded in taking away most of the wealth and the women with them. With a broken heart, Arjun resumed his journey with the remaining people. He reached Hastinapur and went to the presence of Yudhishthir. He stood there for a moment. Then he dropped down in a dead faint. 19. Yudhishthir reaches the heavens. The mental effort of the last few days had been too much for Arjun. He was revived with perfumed water. Arjun woke up from the faint. With great sobs racking his frame, he told them all about how he burnt the dead forms of Balram, Satyaki and Krishn. He told them everything. He told them about the sea claiming the beautiful city of Dwahrika. The story of the robbers and the failing of the Gandhari to frighten a mere band of robbers was the final tragedy. The 5 brothers sat still. They were all thinking of the same thing. Arjun told them about the dream when Krishn took leave of him. Their tears would not flow. Everything inside them had died the instant when they heard about the death of Krishn. There was nothing left to live for in the world. Krishn was gone. There was no meaning in living anymore. They lost interest in everything. Yudhishthir said, Arjun, in the cauldron of time we are all melted away until we lose ourselves. It is now time we melt and lose our individuality. We are now bereft of everything that was dear to us. With the death of Krishna our lives should end too. Arjun said, Yes, my lord. It is time who is the ultimate victor. Hearing the words of Yudhishthir and Arjun, Nakul, Sahdev and Bheem agreed with them. The Pandavas decided to leave the earth and set out on the final journey. Yudhishthir made all the necessary arrangements. He crowned Parikshit as the king. Yuyatsu was appointed as his guardian and Kripa was his guru. The Pandavas announced to the people of the city that they had decided to renounce everything and set out towards the heavens. No one could stop them. They were firm in their resolution. The Pandavas were ready for the great journey. Clad in tree barks and deer skin, they stood in front of the palace door taking final leave of the citizens. Draupadi, dressed in tree bark and without her jewels and silks, stood by their side. The city set up a wail of woe. The Pandavas looked the same as they did years back, when they were exiled from Hastinapur. But it was different now. A strange peace had entered their souls. Their faces were glowing with an inward light. They bade farewell to Hastinapur and went away. They first went towards the city of Dwahrika. They saw the city submerged under water. They stood on the shores of the sea. Out of the sea their dreams seemed to speak to them, their dreams of the long ago. While they were absorbed in the contemplation of the past, Agni appeared before them. He said, Arjun, you are still having the Gandhari and the quivers with you. I got them from Varun for you. They have served their purpose. You do not need them anymore. Please return them to Varun. Arjun's heart just broke. He took up the Gandhari and the quivers. He made a pradakshina to them, and with tears in his eyes he threw them into the ocean. The Pandavas were traveling towards the north. Soon they reached the great range of mountains, the great Himavun. They crossed that. They came to the mountain Meru. As they were proceeding, Draupadi dropped down dead. It was a dreadful happening. Bheem was dumb with the shock of it. He composed himself and asked Yudhishthir why Draupadi, who was faultless, should fall down dead. Yudhishthir said, Bheem, though we were all her husbands, she was more fond of Arjun. That is the only sin she committed. But for that, she was pure. That is the reason why she could come so far. They left her there and proceeded further. Sahdev was the next to fall. It was because he was proud of his wisdom that he had to fall, said Yudhishthir. Nakul died next. Yudhishthir told Bheem that Nakul was vain about his beauty. It was Arjun's turn next. Bheem was told that he had to fall because he had sworn that he could kill all the enemies all by himself. He had insulted all the other great heroes by his remark. That was the reason for his death. They went some more distance. Bheem was the last to fall. He called out to Yudhishthir, Why should I fall? What have I done, my lord? Yudhishthir said, My beloved Bheem, you have ever been dear to me. But the only fault I could find in you was this, you would boast about your strength. You were a great eater too. Otherwise, there is no one like you in this entire world, Bheem. Yudhishthir went on and on, alone in his pursuit of peace. Ever since they left Hastinapur, a dog had been following the Pandavas. It went with the party till the very end. Yudhishthir's brothers were gone and their queen was gone. But this dog was still with Yudhishthir. He had reached the end of the journey. Yudhishthir saw a strange glow all around him. He saw Indra come in his chariot. Indra descended from his chariot and approached Yudhishthir. He said, "Yudhishthir, you must get into this chariot. I have brought it myself as a special mark of honor. Please come with me to the heavens." Yudhishthir did not want to go to heaven without his brothers and without Draupadi. He said, "My brothers and my beloved Draupadi set out with me on this journey. They have all fallen down. Their human bodies have been abandoned, and I do not know where they have gone. Unless they all come with me, I will not come with you." Indra smiled at him and said, "My dear Yudhishthir, they have also gone to heaven. They have cast off this human body. But you have been asked to come with me. You have been granted the privilege of entering the home of the gods with your human form." Yudhishthir said, "I am honored, my lord, by your coming. Now that you assure me that I will meet my dear ones there, I am prepared to go to heaven with you. Please let me bring this dog with me. It has been with me ever since I left Hastinapur. It is devoted to me. I would like to bring it along with me to heaven." Indra laughed at him and his foolish love for a dog. He said, "Yudhishthir, you have been granted immortality. You are my equal. You have been the most fortunate person in the world. Please do not lose all this because of your love for a dog. There is no place in heaven for a dog. Please abandon it and come with me." Yudhishthir shook his head. He said, "My lord, you are asking me to do something which I cannot do. This dog has shared all my troubles so far. It has been devoted to me. I cannot abandon this dog." Indra said, "You are just foolish. You have come to the threshold of heaven, and yet you are affected by human feelings. I cannot take this dog in my chariot." Yudhishthir said, "All the acts of mine which have earned this heaven for me will be destroyed if I behave without compassion towards this dog. It has been my rule never to abandon one who is dependent on me. This dog is a dependent. I cannot leave it and go." Indra said, "You have abandoned all your brothers and your queen. Is this dog, then, more dear to you?" Yudhishthir said, "They were all dead. I could not revive them. I would not have left them if they had been alive. But this dog is alive. I cannot leave it. I will not enter heaven unless I am allowed to bring this dog with me. That is certain." The dog now changed its form. It assumed the form of his father, Dharm. He said, "My son, I am proud of you. Your compassion wins my heart. Once before, in Dwaitavan, when you were in the presence of your dead brothers, I tested your righteousness. You passed the test when you asked for the life of Nakul. Again, I have tested you today. You have pleased me. Go with Indra to the heavens you have earned." The place was now crowded by the denizens of heaven. They had come to see the first person who was to reach the heavens with his human body. It was never done before. Narad said, "Yudhishthir, you will now be in the company of all your ancestors. The great kings, who ruled the earth before you, are all there. You can be with them always." Yudhishthir said, "I am honored by these words of yours, my lord." Yudhishthir ascended the great chariot of Indra. The chariot rose up in the air and traveled in the sky. They reached the city called Amaravati. Yudhishthir was taken to the great hall. Narad showed him all the kings who were there. He said, "Look at all the kings who were your ancestors. They have perfumed the pages of time with their good deeds and their lasting fame. You are now one of them." Yudhishthir looked all around. His eyes scanned the entire hall. He said, "I do not see my brothers here. I do not see my queen here. I want to go where my brothers have preceded me. I do not want any other place for myself. I want to be taken to my brothers. Indra heard these words. He said, Yudhishthir, stay here in this great hall. You have earned a place in heaven. You are the most righteous king that ever ruled the earth. It is but right that you should stay on here. Why do you still allow worldly emotions to affect you? You are not on the earth anymore. You are in heaven. Cast off this foolish love for your brothers. You can stay on here. You can be happy here. Yudhishthir was hearing the words of Indra, but his eyes were searching for his brothers everywhere. He could not find them anywhere. Yudhishthir looked at Indra and said, You are the Lord of the gods and you are granting me the privilege, the great privilege of being with you. But my lord, I cannot stay in this place, not even for a moment. My brothers are not here. Without them heaven will be just hell for me. I am prepared to forgo this great privilege that I have been granted. You must tell me the place where they are. You must take me to the place where I can find the dark Draupadi. Take me to the place where I can find my beloved Bheem and Arjun. I want to be with my brothers Nakul and Sahdev. I want to be with the sons of Draupadi. I do not want anything else. Please take me to them. They were all watching him. He was startled into action. He looked at all the people, searching for his brothers, and his eyes lighted on Duryodhan. 20. The Rules of Heaven. Duryodhan was in the heaven which Yudhishthir had earned with so much effort. Duryodhan was seated on a jeweled seat. He was full of splendor. He was sitting in the midst of all the kings who had made the earth richer by their good actions. Yudhishthir was amazed. He said, I cannot bear to see this Duryodhan here. He has been the cause of the death of so many kings of the earth. He was a very sinful man. He does not please my eyes. I will not stay in this heaven with Duryodhan as my companion. O ye gods, please take me away from here. Please take me to my brothers. I cannot stay here for even a moment more. Narad heard these words. He smiled gently at him and said, Listen to me, Yudhishthir. I will tell you how your cousin Duryodhan came to this place. He is loved by all the kings here. He has reached heaven because he died fighting. His soul has been cleansed because he died fighting bravely. He has been harassing good men like you for years. He has been the cause of the death of so many. It is all true. But my child, Duryodhan was true to his birth. He was a Kshatriya and he died as a Kshatriya should. He was never afraid. He ruled his kingdom justly. You must not judge him as a human being does. The rules of heaven are different from those of the earth. Every sin of a Kshatriya is forgiven if he dies a noble death. Again, Duryodhan died on the holy spot called Samantapanchaka. Balram granted that he should go to heaven. Gandhari's penance is also responsible for this. You must forget your anger against Duryodhan. This is heaven. Yudhishthir. There is no place for enmity in heaven. Yudhishthir heard all that he was told. His form was trembling with eagerness to meet his brothers. He said, My lord, I am a stranger to heaven. I do not know the rules of heaven. I am still a human being with the feelings of a man from the earth. I am wondering about my brothers. If this sinner Duryodhan deserves this heaven, what about my dear brothers? They have never swerved from the path of truth and duty. They are great heroes. They are great men. I want to see which place has been assigned to them. I want to see my elder brother, Radhaya. I am so eager to see Satyaki and Drishtadhum. I want to see all my friends who died for me. I want to see my child Abhimanyu. I want to see my friend Krishn. Please take me to them. Yudhishthir's voice was a wail of agony now. His impatience was pathetic. He could not speak anything else. He wanted to be taken to his brothers. Again he spoke. He said, There were so many kings who died for me. I do not see them here. Radhaya must be here. I do not see him here. Where is Abhimanyu? I do not understand the rules of heaven. I will be happy only if I am in the company of my brothers. The attendants of Indra were there. Indra said, if you are bent on meeting them, I will send you to them. My attendants will take you there. They will do anything you wish. The attendants led the way, and Yudhishthir followed. The path was very long. Gradually the glow and beauty that were found near heaven were being lost. It was now dimly lit and dark. Later it was completely dark where they were going. The atmosphere was full of poisonous smells. It was intolerable. The place looked like another Kurukshetra. Dead forms and worms and horrible things were to be found everywhere. Yudhishthir said, why, this place is dreadful. Where can I find my brothers? Where is the spot? They said not a word. Yudhishthir said, to which god does this part of heaven belong? I want to know. The attendant said, my lord, this is the road that leads you to your brothers. We have been asked to take you as far as you are able to go. If you find this place unbearable, you can retrace your steps. It was not possible for Yudhishthir to stand there. The air was so poisonous. He stood for a moment and decided to return. He was about to turn back. He heard voices speaking to him. The voices said, Yudhishthir, please do not go back. Please do not go away. Please stand where you are. Your coming has relieved us of our sufferings. You are righteous. Your presence is soothing to us in our agony. Please do not go away. Yudhishthir thought that the voices were familiar. He said, who are you that call out to me for help? The voices said, I am Radhaya, I am Bheeshm. Yudhishthir heard the voices of all his brothers and Draupadi and Drishtadhum. Yudhishthir was amazed at this. His anger was now beyond all control. He said, why are they all here? They have been sinless. I cannot understand the rules of heaven. A man like that sinful Duryodhan is in heaven, glowing like a second Indra, and my brothers and Draupadi and all those who are dear to me are in hell. Am I awake or am I asleep? Is this a nightmare? Yudhishthir turned to the attendants of Indra and said, I have heard the voices of my brothers. You can all go back to your master and tell him that Yudhishthir has found his heaven. An hour passed thus. Then came to Yudhishthir Indra and all the other gods of heaven. When they came, the place took on a different appearance. The darkness lifted and the place lost its dreadful appearance. The air was now sweet and pure, and it was all mysterious to Yudhishthir. Indra spoke to him. He smiled and said, the heavenly host is pleased with you, Yudhishthir. You have earned the heavens today. Your love for your brothers is wonderful. It is the rule that hell must be passed by every king. You had to pass through this hell for that reason. Also because of that one lie you spoke when Drona was killed. You are now free from all sin. You say that you cannot understand the rules of heaven. I will tell you. A man whose sins are greater than his good actions reaches heaven first. After the time of his stay in heaven expires, he goes to hell. But for a man whose good actions exceed his sins, hell is his first dwelling place. Then he reaches heaven. Your sins have been few. In fact, only one sin is ascribed to you, that one lie. As for your brothers, you have yourself told Bheeshm what sins they have committed. For that they had to stay in hell for the period of a few hours. They are all cleansed of their sins. Drishtadhum was also made to stay in hell for just a few hours. They are all now in heaven. Come with me. This was all just an illusion. Your brothers are not here. Come with me. I will show them to you. Dharm came there. He said, this is the third and final test. You have proved that you are the image of me. I was responsible for all this experience of yours. Come now and see all of them in heaven. They took Yudhishthir to the river Ganga which flowed in heaven. He bathed in it. He was able to cast away his human feelings, and his body was now divine. In a happy frame of mind Yudhishthir went to heaven with the gods. They entered the great hall of Indra. Krishn sat there in the midst of all the gods. By his side, smiling at Yudhishthir, sat Arjun. They rose up and came to the side of Yudhishthir and welcomed him. With them he saw Radhaya, his dear brother. He was with the 12 sons. Yudhishthir saw Bheeshm surrounded by the Maruts. Nakul and Sahdev were with the heavenly twins, the Ashvinis. They all came to him and welcomed him to heaven. Draupadi was there, glowing like a big flame. She was surrounded by her sons. Satyaki and all the heroes of the Vrishni house were there. Abhimanyu was there by the side of the cool and charming moon. Drishtadhum was found by the side of Agni. Bheeshm was seen with the Vasus and Drona was by the side of Brihaspati. Duryodhan's sins were all redeemed, and he had attained the heavens. He was not doomed to hell. Vidur was seen in the company of them, and they came to Yudhishthir to take him with them. Epilogue. Krishn, the incarnation of the Lord, had asked the gods to be born in the world of men to help him in his work, the destruction of evil and the establishment of Dharm. Indra, Vayu, Dharm and the Ashvini twins were on the earth for a time. The earth was to be cleansed of the poisons which were choking her. The earth was made pure because these gods had walked on it. The seed of Dharm had been planted in the soil, which was prepared by the blood of the noblest of men. The purpose of their birth had been served. They had to return to heaven once more. The Pandavas were absorbed into the gods who were their fathers. The world is richer for the few years of glory that was hers when Krishn walked on it. The story of the lives of the Pandavas has become immortal. So long as the world lives, so long as the sun and the moon move in their orbits, so long as there is a spark of goodness in the heart of man, the story of the Pandavas will be read in the world of men.